Chapter 454. The tribe's chief actually came to ask if the Alliance's deputy commander was colluding with the strongest warlock of the tribe? What the hell? Most of the orcs did not understand the common language, but the elves did. At that moment, the elves perked up their ears. Both sides had stopped fighting and pulled apart to listen to the conversation between the two leaders. The few orcs who knew the common language were ready to be translators. As a leader of the Alliance, Duque did not have to answer Orgrim's stupid question. But Duque did not dare to not answer. Colluding with the Horde was a major crime. Thinking about the fate that Alterac was about to face, King Eden would probably be cursed for all eternity even after his death. Duque used a voice amplification spell to answer. Colluded? The pitiful orc King Orgrim. Don't you know that you are being used by Ghoul Dan? No, I should say, don't you know that our Alliance and your Horde are all victims of the Burning Legion's Demon Lord's scheme? What? No wonder Orgrim was shocked. He really did not know Ghoul Dan's motives, or the source of his true power. The Lord of the Burning Legion, the evil god Sargeras, controlled our world's guardian, Medivh. He colluded with your warlock Ghoul Dan, who was seduced by the Demon Lord, Kill Jaden. That's how the Dark Portal came about and how your Horde invaded the world of Azeroth. To put it bluntly, you orcs are just pathfinders for the demons to invade this world. No, that's because our world is on the brink of destruction. Orgrim argued. Yes, it's because of the power of the demons that brought your world to destruction. Duque did not hold back his sarcasm. Orgrim was shocked. He could not help but recall his late friend Durotan's complaint. I think it's Ghoul Dan and his warlocks who destroyed our world. You see, wherever they go they use their dark powers. The land is drying up, the trees are withering, there's no grass and there's no prey. Without prey the orcs have no choice but to starve. He would never forget how many of his clansmen had been sacrificed on the way to the Dark Portal when his clan was migrating. Some were weak, some were sick, and some were severely injured by their prey. Once upon a time, the survival of the fittest rule of the orcs for thousands of years made him feel that this was only natural. Now that he thought about it, whether it was Durotan or Duque, what they said was undoubtedly true. When Orgrim first saw the Dark Portal, it was still a dirty swamp, but it was not lacking in life. But now, during the winter he returned to the Dark Portal. That place had become a barren wasteland. Gray hills, crimson earth. There were no ordinary beasts, only monsters mutated by dark powers. Now that he thought about it, it should be the warlock's demonic power. Haha. Have you thought it through? You orcs are just a bunch of pitiful creatures being toyed with by the devil. All your glory is just a joke to embellish the devil's conspiracy. And the one who is playing with you is Ghoul Dan. Duque mercilessly spat out his poisonous tongue. Have you thought it through? Since you've thought it through, then scram. Orcs, go back to your world. Ghoul Dan. Orgrim waved his warhammer as he roared at the sky. I will use this to kill you. I will see you pay the price for your betrayal. When Orgrim shouted, there were a few in the Alliance who thought that they would not have to fight in the future. They were too naive. However, the Horde has no other choice. We will punish the traitors. But the orcs must continue to multiply. So, your world, we're definitely taking it. Duque's expression changed. Orgrim took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. I will lead my clan south. We will clear out the obstacles along the way and make sure that the road is clear. Once we deal with Ghoul Dan, we will return. When that time comes, it will be the end of the Alliance. While he doubted if his words would come true, and they were lucky to catch Lordaeron off guard this time, it would not happen a second time. But Orgrim had to say it. Even if they lost, they could not lose. They could not lose in terms of momentum. Since their goal was to destroy the other side, there was no need for peace, and there was no need to show weakness. Duque narrowed his eyes and said coldly, there is no need to wait for the future. Today I want all of you to die here. Duque waved his hand. With the self-destructing demon spirit as the vanguard, the Alliance's army attacked again. But at this moment the Horde had a clear goal, to break through. Even if Aurelia and the other rangers rained arrows on the Horde, and Marion and the other mages kept releasing magic attacks, the effect was limited. Every time they almost caught up to the Horde's formation, a small tribe would bring hundreds of people back and fight to the death. The Silver Hand led by Tyrion Fordring was, after all, only a group of city guards who could barely ride on horseback. They were trash in terms of combat power. After the Horde paid the price of 5,000 lives, Orgrim led his army back into the Alterac Mountains. Orgrim retreated, but Duque was not happy at all. Because he knew what the Horde had sent to save them. On the western battlefield, the battle was still fierce. At this moment, Kudrin Wildhammer suddenly felt something flying towards him from the sky. He glanced at it and saw a black shadow flying down from the clouds above his head. At first, he thought that it was a warrior who came to report to him about the battle, but he immediately felt that the way this guy flew was not like a griffin. There were even more black shadows coming from the southeast. It seemed like they came from Lake Lord Emir, and they were probably flying at a higher altitude than them. But what were those things? But as the black shadows approached at high speed, they became bigger and bigger, to the point that they covered his vision. In the name of AI Ruefeng, Kudrin muttered to himself. He was completely intimidated by the largest among them. It had a slender body, a long tail and neck, and huge wings that occasionally flapped and extended high into the sky. Only one flying creature could have such a huge body. As the last of the clouds dispersed, the sun shone on them. The creature's body shone with a red light and was covered with dark red scales. Kudrin knew that his judgment was correct. It was a dragon. Kudrin's kill count had already reached double digits, but this one was completely different. Because if his eyes weren't playing tricks on him, this was an ancient colossal dragon whose size was comparable to the 5 great dragon kings. It was definitely over 10,000 years old. Chapter 455. What kind of joke was this? Even though Kudrin had killed so many red dragons controlled by the orcs, he never thought that he would have to face an opponent of this level one day. A young dragon under 1,000 years old could easily destroy a town. A young dragon under 10,000 years old could destroy a human army. But what about an ancient dragon that was more than 10,000 years old? The answer was, enough to destroy a kingdom. This dragon was still far away, but it had already let out a loud roar. The surging sound waves caused the clouds to scatter, and the air around it to distort slightly. Its crimson-red wings spread out and even the ground shook slightly. It was like a falling comet, heading straight for the Lordaeron soldiers who were blocking the horde's escape. Well, here's the problem. How could they stop an orc army that was charging at them at full speed? The answer was to form a solid infantry formation. How could they save more lives from the dragon breath of an ancient dragon? The answer was to disperse the formation, and turn it into a formation of scattered soldiers. Mograine knew how to deal with any given situation. Unfortunately, even someone as brave and skilled as Alexandros Mograine was dumbfounded when he suddenly encountered such a situation. It was not that he did not receive an emergency magic message from Duque. But an army of 100,000 soldiers could not retreat at will. On the noisy battlefield, it would take more than 10 minutes for the message to reach the front lines. Most of the soldiers' first reaction when they were suddenly asked to disperse while they were fighting well was to refuse. The task of blocking the orc army's retreat and killing the most orcs was personally given by King Tarinas. King Tarinas hated the orcs who burned the entire Silverpine forest to the ground. Even though most of the burning was done by the flamethrowers of the FFF team without the orcs, there was no need for such cruel weapons. Well, in the end, the orcs deserved to die. And as the core of the alliance, Lordaeron had to play a more important role, and not let Duque have all the glory. In the end, the first target of the dragon that came out of nowhere was Lordaeron's army. Even though Mograine had sounded the horn to disperse the battle, the dragon was still too fast. When the WRM flew past at high speed, the wind pressure generated by the mere flapping of its wings was enough to create a terrifying storm in half of the Rotterdam Kingdom's army, causing everyone nearby to be blown off their feet and rolling on the ground like rolling gourds. The gigantic ballistae and catapults originally required 2 horses to pull and at least 10 engineers to operate. Now, these huge war machines were like children's toys, falling apart with a single scratch from the dragon's claws. A catapult was caught in the air by the dragon's claws, and then thrown down wantonly. The wooden car disintegrated in mid-air, turning into countless pieces like scattered leaves in a storm. They smashed into the heads of the Lordaeron soldiers. All of a sudden, a ball of bluish-purple light that was not large but very eye-catching appeared in the sky above the Rotterdam Kingdom's army. It was the light of the portal opening, and an old mage with white hair and a white beard stepped out of the portal. In the next moment he slowly descended and stood on a huge piece of ice that rose from the ground. In the Alliance there were only 2 pharaoh with such an aura. The one who was good at playing with ice was naturally the strongest mage in the Dalajan, Antonidas. The old mage held onto his icicle staff and shouted into the sky, his angry voice immediately echoing in the air through the magic amplification. Tyrannies, answer me, why do you have to stoop so low as to serve these despicable green worms? Forgive me, Alexstrasza is in their hands, I had no choice. Tyrannies' vertical pupils showed clear sorrow. With that, the ancient WRM Tyrannis spread its huge wings that had a wingspan of at least 30 to 40 meters, almost hovering in midair. A faint crimson light shone from its chest, spreading from its chest to its long neck. Then a blazing dragon's breath came out of its mouth filled with sharp teeth. This dragon's breath was so huge that it felt like the whole sky had become a huge burning cloud, pressing heavily on the Scarlet Cross Army's heads. Almost at the same time, a huge ice tornado with a diameter of more than 100 meters rolled up without warning. The cold air quickly condensed into palm-sized icicles, mixed in with the tornado and rose into the sky, colliding with the dragon's breath that was like the flames of hell in the air. At that moment, the whole sky seemed to flash with a chaotic glow of white and red. The violent energy reaction stirred up a huge energy turbulence that completely enveloped the entire northern region of the battlefield. The thousands of people around Antonidas were instantly swept up by the terrible turbulence and died. This was not the end. The violent energy continued to spread in all directions. With the human and dragon as the center of the battle, time seemed to stop for a second, and then in the next second time started to flow again. A powerful shock wave that could overturn everything standing within a kilometer began to sweep the entire battlefield. Well, a battle of hundreds of thousands of people had been messed up by these two guys who were completely cheating. This was not a battle of the same level at all. Mortals could not interfere in a battle of this level at all. At this moment, Duque arrived. "We're late." Aurelia bit her lip. "No, it's not too late. In fact, it's just in time." Duque handed an especially thick arrow to Aurelia and another to Sasha. "Chem? Can you shoot these two arrows at Tyrannis' eyelids?" "What's the use?" Aurelia expressed her doubt. "Even the eyes of a dragon have a membrane that's harder than steel. Even if our arrows hit it, we won't be able to hurt it." "I didn't say we're going to kill Tyrannis." In fact, the one who was more doubtful was Duque. But Duque would not dare say it even if he died. In history, Tyrannis should have died in the Dragonmaw clan's grim battle fortress because he was too weak. Why was Tyrannis still alive and kicking, running over to the tribe's rescue team? But he still had to do what he had to do. Duque could not sit back and watch as the Alliance's army was beaten like dogs. "Sasha, you go first." "Okay." The silver-haired Sasha knocked an arrow. Just like her sister, Sasha's posture when she pulled the bow also had a valiant and heroic air. The Creator had given the High Elves the most beautiful appearance, and the long years of battle had trained the Windrunner sisters' unparalleled heroic spirit on the battlefield. A strong wind blew and Sasha's wind arrow flew out. The arrow's trajectory was so light, like a piece of cotton in the wind. Tyrannis, who was in a fierce battle, did not notice the arrow until it exploded less than half a meter away from his eyeball, releasing a blinding light. Flash grenade. Chapter 456. Any creature, as long as they weren't blind, would naturally close their eyes in the face of strong light. Tyrannis closed his eyes. Just for a moment. At the same time, Aurelia's double arrow arrived. Poof. With a muffled sound, the thing on the arrow exploded above the dragon's eyelid, and a layer of strange substance seemed to cover the dragon's eyelid. At this moment, Tyrannis suddenly shrank his neck. He didn't know what it was, but he instinctively felt that something was wrong. The ancient dragon's incomparable experience told him that touching this thing would cause him to lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. He flinched. Aurelia's mouth opened wide. She couldn't hide her surprise and regret. Her confident attack was actually dodged by Tyrannis with unparalleled reflexes. It was supposed to be like this. However, two hands of magic suddenly appeared above the two blobs of liquid that exploded. One beat. Smack. The two balls of liquid were slapped onto Tyrannis' eyelid at lightning speed. For an ancient colossal dragon, the long years had allowed him to train and evolve everything he had. The scales of young dragons were soft, and even the most ordinary human weapons could easily cause fatal damage to them. As time passed, the scales would become harder. After 1,000 years, the scales would become even harder than steel. Unless it was an epic weapon, it would be impossible to break through the tough scales of a dragon. Dragon skin was similar. The older a dragon was, the thicker and more resilient its skin was. This made dragons one of the most terrifying creatures on the planet. To be honest, mages below the level of Radiant Moon could barely cause any damage to an ancient dragon. In Duke's memory, all the bosses of the dragon race in the game had to have at least 25 companions like him who could not be killed before they could attempt to take down the boss. How to deal with an ancient dragon that was likely to go berserk became a difficult question. He couldn't beat it, but he couldn't drag it out either. The answer was revealed. It was glue. This was something Duque accidentally discovered when he went to Iron Stove Castle at the beginning of the year to inspect the creations of the gnomes who were courting death. The gnome named it BBBBB Superglue. Of course, Duque didn't mind calling him BB Glue. It was actually a kind of glue that solidified instantly. Originally, the gnome was going to use it to repair the gnome aircraft, but because it solidified too quickly, it was rejected by all the gnome technicians. In the end, Duque only used 5 gold coins to buy a large barrel. Now it was time to use it on Talanis. Flash Grenade forced Talanis to close his eyes. Random BB glue could prevent the dragon from opening its eyes. Talanis had lived for tens of thousands of years and had never seen anything like this. For a moment he thought he had gone blind. However, the rays of light that seeped through the gap in his eyelids told him that it was only his eyelids that were glued shut. "Help me." A magical message was sent to Antonidas, and the Kirin Tor Council immediately understood. Talanis stopped its dragon breath and tried to fly higher to avoid the possible attack. However, he did not notice that a huge ice ball was forming at high speed 100 meters above his head. Condense, condense, condense again. The heaven-defying effect of the Crown of Ice magic circuit was revealed at this moment. With the cooperation from the Alterac Palace, Antonidas and Duque's coordination was even more pure. Basically, he did the work and Duque controlled it. Use the sonic arrow to disrupt the shooting, Duque shouted. In less than 2 seconds, 2 huge explosions exploded in Talanis's ears. Bzzz, Talanis's 5 senses were all messed up. Giant dragons were the true overlords of the sky. The sudden blindness would only affect the giant dragons temporarily. However, the wind-type sonic arrow that had been strengthened by the storm altar was different. The sudden explosion of the arrow not only disrupted Talanis's hearing, but it also made him unable to feel the flow of the wind. It could be said that at this moment his sight, hearing and senses were temporarily disabled. Without hesitation the huge ice ball fell from the sky. With a powerful boom and an unparalleled momentum, as if it was a perfect trajectory that had been calculated thousands of times, the ice ball actually hit Talanis's skull right as he shook his head in pain. Bam! With a loud bang the ancient dragon was smashed to the point of seeing stars. Fell. Get out of the way. The people and orcs below, as long as they could react, all revealed horrified expressions. The dragon fell. At that moment, it was as if there was a terrible earthquake near the point of impact. The ground, which was supposed to be extremely thick, was like a piece of rotten meat that had its bones pulled out. After a loud bang, a huge pit that was at least 10 meters deep was shoveled out by the tumbling dragon. The ground on both sides of the pit suddenly bulged, sending people and things flying into the sky. The surging shockwaves spread in all directions, throwing more people into the air. Even Mograine himself was sent flying by the huge force along with his horse, and then fell heavily to the ground. The only fortunate thing was that he separated from his beloved horse in midair, which saved him from being crushed by the warhorse. Grom Hellscream, who was attacking fiercely at the front lines, was also hit. The place where Talanis fell was too unlucky. It happened to be aimed at him. As a result, the great hero of the tribe was sent tumbling backward like a rolling gourd, knocking over countless of his own people. He rolled for about 100 meters before he finally managed to stop the momentum of his backward motion. Talanis's fall caused the entire front line to fall into chaos. High Lord Mogaine's flag fell, and the High Lord himself temporarily lost contact. This caused the nobles at the back to panic, and the noble army they led was even more chaotic. Even though they were far away and received much less counterattacks, they still fell left and right, unable to form a proper formation. At this moment the orcs exerted their strength. In a chaotic battle, the unique characteristics of the orcs' individual combat abilities were magnified almost limitlessly in such a situation. Many orcs did not even get up before attacking the humans with whatever weapons they had at hand. Hammers, daggers or even fists and fangs. They could deal fatal blows to the humans who were physically weaker. Many of the human warriors were sent flying again before they could even stand up, falling heavily onto their own comrades. Loktar. The loud and clear slogan was answered by hundreds of people. Hundreds of people responded. Mograine had no choice but to blow the bugle and order his subordinates to form small defensive formations. The result was that the army barely managed to survive, but at least 30,000 orcs broke through the encirclement and entered the vast forest of Tirisful Forest. Talanis, who was temporarily blinded, struggled to fly away. Chapter 457. The defense of Lordaeron was over. It ended with the Alliance's victory. However, this was not a satisfactory result for either side. They did not win big when they should, and they did not lose when they should. Orgrim retreated back to the Alterac Mountains. It was obvious that he would choose to pass through Alterac and return to the hinterlands. He would then board the ship at the sea cliff and return to the southern continent to find Gul, Dan. As for Grom and his Warsong tribe beastmen, their whereabouts were a mystery. Grom was no longer as aggressive as before. He purposely avoided all human towns and restrained his subordinates, hiding in the boundless forest. Everyone knew what kind of damage 30,000 beastmen could do. If left alone, they would be able to destroy the only core area of Lordaeron. It was not a good feeling to have enemies hiding right under their noses. King Tyrrhenus came to find Duque almost as soon as the battle ended. Please? We must not let these evil green-skinned beasts go. I need the support of the Elven Rangers, including Quell, Delos, and your direct ranger. If possible, I hope you can personally lead the attack on this tribe. I'm sorry, but I have more important things to do. We must first send people to save the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Otherwise, when Tyrrhenes comes again, no one will be able to fight him. Your Majesty, that's a real ancient red dragon that can destroy a kingdom all by itself. Tyrrhenes was shocked. Didn't you and Sir Antonidas work together to defeat that giant lizard? No. He obviously held back. I can feel that he doesn't want to fight the Alliance. Antonidas' words helped Duque out of the situation. Duque suddenly said, Actually, I used Aurelia's Whisper of the Wind to tell Tyrrhenes that the Alliance will save the Red Dragon Queen as soon as possible. I hope he won't attack us with full force. What an explosive news. A real dragon. Noxus stroked his beard. In order to maintain morale and deceive the people, they could of course say that the Great Alliance hero Antonidas and Duke Marcus worked together to defeat the Red Dragon. But after hearing this inside story, every king and general's face darkened. That was an existence that violated the rules. It could render all strategies and tactics useless. In the face of this level of power, the battle between humans and beastmen was not even worth mentioning. Ever since Duque had crossed over to the world of Azeroth with the identity of a poor college student, he had been prepared to fight all kinds of unscientific non-human monsters in the future after he had gained a foothold. For example, dragons, elemental kings, ancient gods. Unfortunately, when it came down to it, Duque still felt that he was not ready. After all, in the game before he transmigrated, any giant dragon would be a proper game template. The problem was that he had transmigrated here alone. This was not like the game, where he could gather 25 companions who could revive infinitely and form a party to fight a boss. The only thing that could make Duque feel at ease was that he now had Aurelia and other strong people who had stepped into the realm of heroes to help him. Cudrin Wildhammer stroked his orange-red, well-combed beard. Actually, we can also think on the bright side. If we can really save Alexstrasza, maybe the Red Dragon army will side with the Alliance. After all, these big lizards were forced to fight with the Alliance before. King Salas sighed. The problem is that we don't even know where the Red Dragon Queen is. King Lang raised his hand. According to the intelligence of my subordinates, it is very likely that she is in the wetlands, in the dwarven fortress of Grim Battle. Duque had been hesitating about whether to reveal the truth. Seeing that the bandits from MI7 and Stormwind were so powerful, he was relieved. Salas was very excited. If they could deal with the Red Dragon Queen, the pressure on Torrential Fortress would definitely be greatly reduced. Really? Then can the Special Ops team from Stormwind? Lang smiled bitterly and shook his head. My people lack funds. They have already done their best to get this information. Then leave it to the elite secret forces of Lordaeron to handle this matter. King Tyrrhenes was full of confidence. Duque really did not want to hurt Tyrrhenes's confidence. Regardless of whether Tyrrhenes's bandits could deal with the mysterious demon soul, according to the original history, it was the famous Black Dragon King, Neltharion, who was now known as Wings of Death, who had really tricked Alexstrasza into the hands of the Horde. Would Wings of Death let Tyrrhenes's silly bandits save the Red Dragon Queen before he achieved his goal? Duque could almost imagine the tragedy that would befall the elite bandits of Lordaeron. Unfortunately, he could not reveal the truth. After the leaders of the Alliance thought that they had settled the matter of the Red Dragon army, the meeting entered the main topic: how to wipe out the Horde. Under the premise that they were united against a common enemy, the meeting went very smoothly. There was no more wrangling and shoving like when the Alliance was first established. The main goal was as follows: push the front line to the dwarven kingdom of Cosmodan as soon as possible before winter, and rescue the besieged Iron Stove Castle. At this moment, the hundreds of thousands of Alliance troops gathered in Lordaeron were divided into three fronts. Close to 200,000 Lordaeron troops, with the help of Kuel Salas and Duque's Elven Rangers, tried to wipe out the horde that had escaped to the Tirisful forest. Even if they could not wipe out all of them, they had to reduce the number of horde in the area to an acceptable range. For example, below 3,000. Tarina's planned to surround and annihilate these orcs with a large army and a high bounty. The second route was the Griffin Legion and the Wildhammer Dwarves Griffin Knights from the hinterlands. There was a total of 50,000 soldiers chasing after the remnants of Orgrim's army to ensure that they were eliminated, or at least to drive them out of Lordaeron permanently. This route was not difficult. Unless Orgrim gave up on killing Dan, it was basically an armed parade to send the horde out of the Lordaeron continent. The third route was the armies of the other countries. They would be led by Lothar back to the Wall of Thoradin, hoping to recover the fallen Arthi Highlands within 2 months, and drive the horde back to the south bank of Sodder Bridge. After the meeting, Duque rubbed his eyebrows. The second battle of the Dark Portal was finally coming to an end. Back at the state guest house, Illyria massaged Duke's shoulders to relax. How did elves grow? Illyria's fingers didn't even have a callus after a long time of drawing a bow and knocking an arrow? Just as Duque was about to say something, a shocking news came. The Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsus Fail, was critically ill. Chapter 458. Alonsos Fail was a transcendent existence to the entire Alliance. As the national religion of the 7 kingdoms of the Alliance, he was definitely a great figure who could be on an equal footing with any king. At this time, the Alliance had just seen the light of victory, and was about to launch a counterattack. However, the news of Archbishop Alonsos's illness at this critical juncture cast a shadow over the Alliance's victory. It was a huge blow to Anduin, be it publicly or privately. Publicly, it was because Alonsos had promised that he would mobilize his believers to raise funds for the reconstruction of Stormwind after they reclaimed their territory in Stormwind. Once the most prestigious Alonsos died of illness, the revival of the Stormwind Kingdom would most likely be delayed for a very long time. Privately, Anduin and Alonsos had been friends for more than 20 years. Now that his old friend was critically ill, Anduin was naturally anxious. When Duque arrived, the kings who came to visit had already changed a few times. At this moment, there were only 2 high-ranking priests from the Church of Holy Light, Anduin, and Uther accompanying Alonsos. When Duque arrived with Gavin Rad, he immediately discovered that the atmosphere was not normal. What's going on? Is it a disease or something? Duque did not believe that it was a disease. It was because the priests knew how to get rid of diseases and remove diseases. In this era, the most powerful doctors were the priests. Not to mention Archbishop Alonsos Fail, who was at the top of all the priests. Secondly, there was the hospital bed. It was a very special hospital bed. Rather than calling it a hospital bed, it was more appropriate to call it a low-water tank. Because Alonsos was sleeping on it, most of his body was submerged in the sparkling holy water. Only his head was propped up against the pillow. Beside Alonsos, there was a priest who was continuously casting spells to dispel the filthy smell that flowed out of the archbishop's mouth and nose. Anduin leaned over and whispered to Duque, "Alonsos seemed to have touched the blood of the demon in the corpse of a tribal chief when he was studying the corpse. Then he might have triggered a curse in his body. He is now in a terrible state of continuous weakness." Seeing Duque enter, Alonsos opened his half-closed eyes. "All of you leave. Only Uther and Duque will be here." Anduin wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he went out with the 2 high-ranking priests. Only Uther was left, purifying the air in the room with low-level dispelling diseases. Duque was a little hesitant. The historical Fail did not die so quickly. After winning the war against the Horde, Fail also raised a lot of money to build the Cathedral of Light in the rebuilt New Stormwind City. Hence, he became the Archbishop of both Lordaeron and Stormwind Kingdom. In order to commend his devotion to the Church of Holy Light and his contribution to the reconstruction of Stormwind, a statue of Alonsus Fail was erected in front of the Cathedral of Light. The inscription on the statue praised Fail's great contribution to the Alliance in the Second War, raising funds to help rebuild Stormwind City and Northshire Abbey. Fail did not die until the Third War of the Dark Portal, which was before the undead scourge invaded Lordaeron. The cause of his death was unknown. He had never heard of Fail dying. He thought of a very scary possibility. In the end, he still asked, "Sir Fail, was it that day at the Storm Altar?" "That's right." If there was a variable related to Alonsos, it would be that day when Duque stole the fruits of Dan's labor. He found this archbishop to help purify the Storm Altar that had been corroded by the demonic power. Alonsos smiled. "My dear disciple, please swear in the name of the Holy Light that you will not tell anyone about what you saw and heard today." The muscles on Uther's firm and devout face twitched. "I swear in the name of the holy light." Alonso's then turned to look at Duque. "I will answer your question. Yes and no." "Yes? Also no?" Duque was a little confused. "I have spent most of my life spreading the holy light, hoping that the holy light can drive away all darkness and evil. But I have discovered a fact. Whether the holy light drives away evil or darkness devours light, it is a relative process." "Relative?" "That's right. The more devout and pure the soul, the more holy light it produces. But only the side with the greater quantity and quality will be the victor of this battle. I did inhale too much demonic power that day. I thought I could purify it with my own power, but obviously I failed. But that's not important." "Not important?" "Stop joking, Your Excellency, I—" Alonso's reached out from the holy water and waved, stopping Duque from continuing. "I won't die so easily. As long as you send me back to the Holy Light Cathedral in Stratholme, I will be able to survive with the help of the holy water. At most, I will lose some vitality. This is not the time for me to sleep. The most important thing is you, Duque." "Me?" Duque was stunned. "Yes. Yeah." Alonso's pointed at Duque's chest. "In this period of time, you have undoubtedly proven to everyone that you are the brightest star in the Alliance. Your wisdom and foresight almost make me suspect that you are a prophet sent by the creation titans." "Ah. Fine, you are half right. But I am also most worried about you. Compared to your powerful magic power and wise mind, your will is too weak. If some evil existence wants to deal with you, you are the kind of person who is most vulnerable to corruption." Duque, who had been told the truth, felt like his face was on fire. Yes, he was just an ordinary university student before he transmigrated. Without experiencing the ups and downs of life, they lacked enough sharpening and life experiences. This was his biggest shortcoming, and it was a weakness that he could not solve at the moment. Therefore Duque's fear spell was a sure hit. If not for the system elf, he would have died long ago. "I will be careful." No, it is not enough to just be careful. You need a firm belief. Otherwise, if you become the next Savis, that will be the Alliance's nightmare. Savis was once the leader of the High Elves, the core leader of the Kaldorii civilization in ancient Kalimdor. His status was second only to Queen Azhara. Afterwards, his soul was corrupted by the ancient god Enzos, which led to the first Burning Legion invasion in the world of Azeroth. Alonso's words were very heavy. What else could Duque say? He could only pinch his nose and accept it. He received a copy of the teachings of the Holy Light from the Archbishop. Before leaving, Alonso's grabbed Duque's hand and said solemnly, "Be careful of Ghoul, Dan." Chapter 459. Be careful of Ghoul, Dan? Duque couldn't believe Alonso's warning. If the history he was familiar with was right, Ghoul, Dan was obsessed with something even more important. When Ghoul, Dan was on Draenor, he was still a genius shaman. His master was recognized as the strongest shaman in many clans, the chief of the Shadowmoon clan, Nizul. But for greater power, he quickly abandoned his master and joined the Burning Legion's commander, Kil Jaden. Now, the reason he dared to abandon his clan and become a traitor was actually because of the same reason: power. When Ghoul, Dan found out that Sargeras had been beaten into the abyss by Duque, Anduin, and Medivh, he was arrogant enough to think he could open the tomb of Sargeras, dig him out, and steal the power of a fallen titan who had killed many creation titans. According to the course of history, when he and his clansmen opened the door to the dungeon where Sargeras' tomb rose from the bottom of the sea, Ghoul, Dan found only crazy demons waiting for him. In the end, Ghoul, Dan would pay the price for his greed. He was torn to pieces by the crazy demons he released. In the beginning, Duque was still worried that Ghoul, Dan would target him and give him a cursing look. But now, in Duque's eyes, Ghoul, Dan was a little prince who was courting death. It was enough to remove him from the list of threats. Duque was wrong, very wrong. After Aurelia and Servanas left, Duque had nothing to do. Leaving the army wasn't as simple as being a ranger. With their bows and arrows, the rangers could go on a march as they pleased. As experts in surviving in the wild, as long as there was a forest, these rangers would not starve to death. But Duque's army couldn't. Ever since they left Hillsbrad and entered the hinterlands, the Griffin Legion had been fighting for thousands of miles without a good rest. Broken armor, medicine, and treatment of the wounded were all paid for by the Lordaeron Legion. And when they left the human settlements and entered the forest, they also had to prepare large amounts of rations. Reginald, the future Grand Marshal, would naturally be the one to do it. Duque was sleeping. Then Duque was shot. Duque rarely dreamed, but when he did, Duque's dreams were often more realistic than most people's. Other people's dreams were often fragmented, with all kinds of absurd scenes and no sound. Duque's dream was different. Not only did it have sounds and images, but it also had a complete plot. Now, what Duque saw was the following magical scene. This was a night sky that was completely different from that of Earth. The entire universe was like an incomparably huge chaotic sphere, firmly covering the Azeroth. In his field of vision, there was nothing but pitch-black chaos. The dark chaotic clouds kept rolling, and from time to time, a long comet with a green tail would break through the thick clouds and descend to the ground. Duque stood on the scorched ground and stared at the night sky, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the sky. It sounded like a heavy bomber flying over his head, letting out an ear-piercing screech that came closer and closer. It was as if a mysterious force was pulling the scene from a landscape film to a war film. The sound quickly turned into a shrill sound that shook the eardrums and made them bleed and deaf. Duque only saw a huge meteor burning with pale green flames descending from the sky, piercing through his left vision and out of his right vision in the blink of an eye, falling straight into the crystal forest. What the F***ck? Duque only had time to groan in dissatisfaction before the chaotic turbulence with countless sharp rocks and debris hit Duque's face, throwing him to the ground. The sound of the meteorite hitting the ground was endless, and the rising dust covered almost his entire field of vision. Duque raised his head and supported his hands. When he crawled up from the ground, he felt a burning pain on his face. He touched it with his hand and the pain went deep into his heart. **ck. Such a deep wound and so much blood, I'm disfigured. A series of heavy footsteps that shook the earth came, attracting all of Duque's attention. A huge stone giant whose body was burning with green flames stood proudly less than 2 meters in front of Duque. Duque looked up blankly and saw the emotionless inorganic eyes on the skeletal head of the giant. To be precise, it was not a pair of eyes, but more like a gathering point of some kind of energy. It was evil and exuded a cold light that did not match its high body temperature. Not only the eyes, but all the places that were not covered by the skull were burning with green flames. Hellfire? It was a terrifying war machine. Ordinary people without special abilities would die if they were to fight it. It was more than 3 stories tall, and just standing there was a sense of oppression. Bang bang bang. There was another loud sound, and Duque's body was surrounded by hellfire. That kind of earth-shattering pressure, that kind of blazing heat that made it hard to breathe just by standing nearby, that kind of invisible spiritual pressure, caused Duque's expression to change greatly. He did not know how the hellfire came about, he only knew that his life was in danger. Human, kneel. Kneel to the Burning Legion's master. Otherwise, I will let your soul suffer under the eternal flames for eternity. Kneel? Burning Legion's master? Isn't that the Sargeras that I put down? The trace of fear in Duque's heart suddenly disappeared with this line that sounded so funny to Duque. Ha! I'm dying of laughter. Your boss will kneel when he sees me. Just you? Duque stood up proudly, his eyes filled with clear disdain. Yes, that was contempt. The contempt that a higher being had for a lower being. A second later, Duque made his move. No one knew how Duque did it. Very suddenly, 2 40-meter-long golden battleship blades appeared in Duque's hands. Oh la la la, eat my meteor blast slash. Duque shouted the name of the unknown move. A circle of light that was even brighter than the flames flashed. Hundreds of hellfire were kicked over like building blocks, exploding and disappearing. Duque laughed coldly. Your so-called terror can only scare ignorant dogs. Sorry, it won't work on me. In front of Duque, a shadow was slowly condensing into a shape, quietly wriggling. Very quickly, it became a guy that Duque was familiar with, the tribe's demigod warlock, Ghoul, Dan. He had a hunched back and his coarse mouth was open, revealing a mouth full of smelly fangs. Whoosh! Duke Marcus, you really are an interesting human. Since I can't corrode and control you mentally, don't blame me. Oh, strictly speaking, I didn't do it. I just activated a small backdoor that Sargeras left in your body. The next moment, Duque suddenly woke up from his dream. He saw Gavin Rad rushing into his room with a face full of panic, and Vanessa pulling out the dagger from her thigh. Then Duque slowly froze himself in front of them. His fingers were frozen, his breath froze, and his hair started to turn white. Chapter 460. Duque suddenly remembered what was going on. He'd always thought that as long as he didn't fight directly, a super boss like Ghoul, Dan wouldn't notice him. Actually, Duque had definitely taken it for granted. He wasn't a nobody. He'd become a deputy commander of the Alliance and had so many outstanding achievements. There was no way Ghoul Dan hadn't heard of him. It wasn't like Duque didn't know that Ghoul Dan had tried to enter a dream to steal Mediva's power and pry into Mediva's knowledge. Coincidentally, Ghoul Dan had been stabbed by Duque at that time. Ghoul Dan, who was in the mental link, had fallen into a coma, causing the Shadow Council to be raided by Orgrim. But humans were like this. They always had some wishful thinking. Now Duque had paid a terrible price for this wishful thinking. Curse. Yes, it was the gift that Sargeras had left for Duque before he'd been sent into the abyss. At that time, this curse had been split into 3 parts. The biggest part had been taken by Alan, and the result was that it had turned to dust. About a third had been taken by Anduin Lothar. Duke's injuries were probably less than 1/10 of the total. The effect had indeed been split, but Duque had forgotten that he was the main target of the curse. The curse hadn't actually been removed. It was only because he hadn't injected any more power to continue the curse that it seemed to be ineffective. Duque really hadn't expected that Ghoul Dan would trigger this thing when he'd failed to forcibly control his soul in the dream. He'd screwed him over. At that moment on the ship, Ghoul Dan opened his eyes. What an interesting fellow. Is he really only 16? He actually resisted my mental intimidation. The 2-headed ogre hero Google touched his head with both hands at the same time. Apart from that, Mediv, there's actually a human who can resist your mental attack? Ghoul Dan stroked his short beard. No, I haven't done anything to this Duque. It's not that I can't, but that I'm not in the mood. In my opinion, to corrupt this kid's mind and control him, it would only take a little time. Of course, I can also destroy his soul. If I do that, Orgrim might benefit from it. Then why do you want to kill him now? Ghoul Dan was furious. The stupid Alliance actually let Orgrim's main force escape. If I don't control Duque and use the Alliance to weaken the Horde, Orgrim might catch up to me and disrupt my plan. I have people from 2 clans here, so I can't walk fast at all. It's a pity that the control failed. Otherwise, I'd have plenty of time to explore Sargeras' tomb. In reality, Duque also realized that Ghoul Dan probably wanted to use brute force to subdue him and then control his soul, turning him into a puppet. With a vice-commander of the Alliance as a puppet, whether it was to plot against Orgrim or for Ghoul Dan to rule the world in the future, it would be very convenient. But Ghoul Dan didn't expect Duque to resist his soul pressure. In reality, when breaking through the nightmare realm he had created, Ghoul Dan had suffered some damage to his soul. Otherwise, why would Ghoul Dan be so embarrassed and angry that he triggered the curse to kill Duque? No matter what, Duque was in trouble. After coming to this world, Duque had been training his body. But now, a single curse had caused Duque to become extremely weak. No. Duque screamed in his heart, but his mouth couldn't make a sound. This wasn't the ending he wanted. Through a series of struggles, his career was already on the right track, and he had reached a high position in the Alliance. After experiencing the cruel second battle at the Dark Portal, his influence in the Alliance would reach its peak. Cultivating a godly technique, letting his name resound in heaven and hell, marrying a rich and beautiful woman, reaching the peak of life, this was the ending that a transmigrator should have. But what the hell was this? That curse was madly absorbing his life force again? No, I can't die here. Duque tried to use his magic, such as Ice Barrier, to use the absolute ice element to dispel all negative effects. But he couldn't activate the instant magic that he had tried thousands of times. Not only that, he couldn't contact the system elf either. Duque tried to do anything but failed. Only his eyeballs could move. Yes, he was paralyzed. Both his body and soul were like this. He faintly knew that this was the soul attack that Ghoul Dan had given him before dispelling the dream realm. Now Duque's mind became even more blank. He could only watch as Vanessa screamed in shock and approached him, while Gavin Rad reached out his large hand to touch his face. This first contact allowed him to feel something for the first time since he was paralyzed. Gavin Rad's hand was filled with holy light, but the places he touched felt like they were being burned by fire. It was painful, so painful that his brain felt like it was melting. In his daze, Duque only felt that a deep wound had appeared on his face. Exorcism. Gavin Rad let out a thunderous roar. Duque seemed to have woken up. He subconsciously raised his hand to touch his face, only to find that there was no wound at all. Did you hear what I said? Duque. Don't move and focus on receiving my holy light. Gavin Rad turned and glanced at Alusia, who had rushed out of the room next door and shouted, "Inform Weather immediately. It's best if you call Antonidas too." Duque opened his heart, allowing the sea of holy light to rush into his body and soul. Whoosh. 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 Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale, inhale again and exhale again. Originally, the beating of the heart and breathing of the lungs were absolutely normal things for a living person. But for Duque, they had become movements that he had to use his own will to forcibly command his body to do. Moreover, every movement was accompanied by pain. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans emerged from Duque's forehead and all the pores on his body rolling down. Vanessa, who was waiting on him at the side, could not get close to him no matter how agile she was. The intelligent Elugia was the first to inform Antonidas. This top human mage had rushed over quickly, and even brought Wuther with him through a teleportation door. Fortunately, Duque had taken Gavin Rad as his bodyguard, and fortunately, a few key figures in the alliance were free, so Duque's condition quickly stabilized. After a consultation with a group of big shots other than Alonso's, they came to a shocking conclusion. If left alone, Duque's life force would be depleted within a month, and he would die of exhaustion. Chapter 461. Duque might die. The alliance had been in shock for the past few days. Alonso's Fail's illness had only surprised the higher-ups of the alliance. After all, the Church of Holy Light's influence was only in Rotterdam and Stormwind. There were Church of Holy Light preaching in other countries, but most of them were non-believers. When the kings heard about Alonso's, they only said, "I'm sorry to hear this." But Duque was different. Other than King Eden of Alterac, who had already passed away, almost every king knew how to use his troops. They were very clear that compared to the upright and courageous Anduin Lothar, who was more straightforward, Duke was the glue and command tower that united the various countries of the alliance. Terina's Lordaeron was the target of public criticism. Everyone knew that Terina's motives were not pure. No, it should be said that Terina's wanted to use this opportunity to become the second emperor of Soradin. Everyone knew that. If they sent too few troops, it would be Rotterdam's fault. If they sent too many troops and money, they would have to worry about whether it was Rotterdam's conspiracy. At the very least, it would be a form of charity. No kingdom would feel comfortable. With Duque around, the kings were much more at ease. The troops, manpower, and resources that needed to be sent were definitely sufficient and on time. And everyone could see that Duque's insistence on killing was the key to the alliance's strength. If Anduin was the spiritual leader of the alliance, then Duque would be the brains of the alliance, second only to Anduin. Now, just as the alliance was about to turn to the counterattack phase, there was suddenly news of Duque's illness. The kings were really anxious. Visiting the Archbishop of Holy Light was a matter of the leaders of the various countries rushing to express their condolences. But what about Duque? A state guesthouse almost turned into a throne conference. In the end, they had no choice but to move Duque to the Rotterdam Palace. Otherwise, how would it look if 6 or 7 kings surrounded a small state guesthouse? Even so, even King Dalin Proudmoore, who was in charge of the navy, had rushed over on a griffin. It was clear how important Duque was. To everyone's surprise, they saw a different Duque, but not a dying Duque. His short hair was slightly gray as if it was dyed, and there was a small tuft of silver in front of his forehead. Apart from that, there was nothing else. It didn't seem like a big deal, but Antonidas, who was the most authoritative expert on curses, told all the kings that it wasn't that simple. Right now, Duque is like a bucket with many holes. His life force is draining away with every passing moment. In 10 days you will see a 30-year-old Duque. 20 days later he would be 40. 1 month later he won't be 50 years old, but dead. Is there no way to plug the holes or something? King Lang was the most nervous. For the others, losing a Duque was the same as losing a commander of the alliance. The main force of the tribe had been almost wiped out. As long as one wasn't too stupid, they could win the next battle. The only difference was how many lives were lost and how much time was spent. But for Stormwind, it was very likely that they would lose the most important cornerstone of the kingdom for the next 30 years, the pillar of the country. Antonidas shook his head regretfully. A single curse is like a ball of string wrapped around a string. No matter how messy it is, it can be taken out along the string. But Duque's situation is like a ball of string of the same color rolled together. I can't find a clue at all. This is a hole in the soul created by different methods from many worlds. I can't do anything about it. Most importantly, this is a curse cast by a demigod mage. Could a mere Breaking Dawn mage deal with the work of a world guardian? Be it Lang or Anduin, their mouths were filled with bitterness. They didn't expect that after going 1 round, it was still the fault of their dead old friend, Medivh. This was the greatest irony in the world. The temperature in the air gradually dropped. The atmosphere lingering in the air was the same. Almost everyone felt as if they couldn't breathe. That hateful ghoul, Dan. Anduin gritted his teeth and punched the wall. At this time it was Duque who spoke. Actually, the situation might not be as serious as you think it is. Not serious? Then what is serious? King Lang's eyes were red, and even his voice sounded like he was about to cry. Lang didn't cry when he lost the land passed down by his ancestors. Lang didn't cry when Stormwind City, which symbolized the sovereignty of the entire kingdom, fell. Now that Duke was in critical condition, Ryan was crying. From the beginning, his eyes were red to the end, and it only took 2 seconds for him to cry. Rascal, you're about to die. I originally wanted you to help William and let him restore the glory of Stormwind. I originally thought that if it didn't work out, I would let you. Before he could finish his sentence, Anduin patted Lang's shoulder and stopped him. Listen to Duque first. Duque heaved a sigh of relief. I guess the power of the mortal world can't do anything about this. When Duque said this, the king's heart sank. Fortunately, I still have one last hope, the Red Dragon Queen. Alexstrasza? Antonida's slightly cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Yes. Why didn't I think of her? There's hope for Duque. Oh, at least there's hope. What? What? The kings immediately perked up. Not every king was so knowledgeable. They might have received good education from a young age, but most of it was about governing a country, martial arts, and the cultivation of a knight. Only a knowledgeable old mage like Antonidas could possibly know about this. After Antonida's explanation, the kings then realized that Alexstrasza was actually so powerful. In the Battle of the Ancient Times, in order to prevent Sargeras from entering this world through the portal of the Well of Eternity, the spell whirlpool created by the High Elves in the Well of Eternity exploded. The collapse of the Well of Eternity caused a strong earthquake. This earthquake destroyed the skeleton of the world. Nearly 80% of the land of the Azeroth continent was torn apart, leaving only a few fragmented continents around the newly formed ocean. The giver of life, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, cast a magic acorn in the center of the Well of Eternity. The acorn began to sprout once it came into contact with the lake full of magic power, and grew into a huge oak tree. The roots of the tree went deep into the lake, and the huge canopy almost covered the entire sky. This huge oak tree was the eternal symbol of the harmonious relationship between the night elves and nature. The life energy it emitted could slowly spread and heal the wounds of the entire world. The night elves named their world tree Nordrassil, which meant crown of the sky, in the night elves' language. Chapter 462. Since the Red Dragon Queen could even create the world tree, it would be a piece of cake for her to solve a small curse. Duque can be saved. No one said it out loud, but that was what everyone thought. Tyreenas even hinted to Lang with a smile that if his people saved the Red Dragon Queen this time, Lang and Duque would owe Lordaeron a huge favor. This was obviously taking advantage of the situation. Using saving the Red Dragon Queen as a bargaining chip to force the recovered Duque to join Lordaeron was a despicable move. If Lang was a ruthless person, he would definitely not let anyone else get the Red Dragon Queen if he couldn't get it himself. Lang was a merciful king. When Tyreenas made this request, he wasn't thinking about Duque's usefulness, but what Duque had done for Stormwind and the royal family of Rin. Lang gritted his teeth and said, as long as your people save Alexstrasza and let her save Duque's life, and Duque is willing to pledge his loyalty to you, I won't object to his transfer. However, Duque is a real talent. I hope that Duque can at least get the status of a Grand Duke in Lordaeron. Also, no matter what, Karazhan is a territory that I personally gave to Duque. I will never take it back. Tyreenas was overjoyed. He had only wanted to save the Red Dragon Queen, but he didn't expect to get the chance to buy one and get one free. Think about it, the Red Dragon army was willing to submit themselves to the filthy beast men and become their mounts for their queen. If Lordaeron saved the Red Dragon Queen, wouldn't they at least be able to form an army of dragon knights? Coupled with the magic books that Duque and Duque had in the Karazhan Grand Library, one could imagine that in less than 10 years, Lordaeron would become the most powerful and overwhelming country in the entire Eastern Kingdom. Perhaps without the need for war, they could borrow the name of the Alliance to annex the various countries and complete Thoradin the Great's. No, even greater than Thoradin the Great's. That was because the Alliance included 2 dwarf kingdoms and 1 high elf kingdom. While King Tyreenas was making his plans, Duke was making all sorts of arrangements as if he was making arrangements for his death. He had gathered almost everyone around him. First, he had Lang issue an official king's decree, announcing that Duke Fairville of the Bloodsail Pirates had officially become the Duke of Stormwind. He also had the various kings sign the decree in secret, confirming that the Bloodsail pirates had committed crimes against the Alliance. As a price, all the fleets belonging to Stormwind would be under the command of King Dahlin until the war with the orcs officially ended. Even if they were all used as cannon fodder, they would have no regrets. In fact, everyone knew that Dahlin would not go to such extremes. Then, just in case, Duque had Duke Barov transfer the deed of South Shore to Wuxia, and registered Wuxia as the Countess of Stormwind. This was to leave a way out for the Barov family. Wuxia's 2 younger brothers were still missing, but this could become the Barov family's biggest weakness. The Alliance still needed Alterac. Alterac's soldiers had fought bravely to clear the name of their country, but what about after the war? Wuxia glanced at Duke many times, her eyes red and swollen. In the end, all the words she wanted to say turned into a deep bow. No one knew what decision this seemingly weak lady of the Barov family had made. Finally, Duque gave Lang and Anduin the arrangements for the Western Wilderness, as well as the contact information of the Nagas and the Murlocs. The Windrunner yearns for freedom. If I am not here, they will not serve Stormwind. Whatever happens, let them be, Duque said to Lang. No, Duque, you will not die. King Tyrrhenus promised me that his team of spies will definitely rescue Alexstrasza. Duque did not answer immediately but asked, "What deal did you make with that old man Tyrrhenus? Do you think that if he can save my life, you will agree to let me go to Rotterdam?" Lang was not a good liar, and he admitted it as soon as Duque pressed him. "Sorry, I think this is the best for you. Your Majesty." "Call me Lang," King Lang insisted. "All right, Lang, I will tell you in private. Even if I die, I will not go to Rotterdam. I don't know why, but I hate Tyrrhenus. I have no interest in serving Arthas." Duque shrugged. "It's that simple." Lang was speechless. Anduin was speechless. Duque clapped his hands. "All right, if there is anyone in this world who can save Alexstrasza, it will not be Tyrrhenus. Because this is the domain of the dragons and also the domain of mystery." Anduin suddenly thought of something. "Then why Antonidas?" Anduin shook his head at Lang again. Antonidas had to be responsible for the entire Dalagen. He would not risk his life for a foreign duke. At this time Duque looked calm. But Sasha could not take it anymore. "Duque, since the people from Rotterdam are not reliable, we should think of a way to get eldest sister and second sister back, and then we will go in by ourselves. We will go to Kudrin, he will definitely agree." What Sasha said was coincidentally Duque's current predicament. Previously, he had agreed to send Windrunner to help Rotterdam to eliminate the Warsong clan of Grom. In the end, the most reliable Aurelia, Sylvanas, and Lilith were seconded. Because they had to carry out a high-speed battle in the forest, Aurelia and the others did not bring the troublesome mages. In the end, they could not find Aurelia when they needed help at the crucial moment. They had just entered the Tirisful woodlands 2 days ago, and had promised to contact each other once a week. If they waited until they returned, they would probably only be able to collect Duque's corpse. Now, out of the 6 great rangers, only Sasha was left by Duque's side. Duque could not help but feel that the goddess of fate had ill intentions. It was not the first time that Duque recalled the process of the Red Dragon Queen's rescue. In the past, when he understood this epic story, he would always feel fascinated. He could not help but wonder what he would do if he were to participate in this grand history. Could he be like the main characters of this branch story, using all kinds of great powers to create such a miracle? But when he really had to participate in this plot, he felt a little hesitant. He suddenly smiled bitterly. "So, I still have not let go of life and death, moral integrity?" Chapter 463. Once upon a time, Duque had forgotten the fear of death and the uneasiness brought about by the decay of his soul. Looking at the notification on his retina, Duque was still a little confused. "Serious warning, host, your Sargeras curse of resentment is active. You will lose your life force at the rate of 1 year per day. This effect has an unknown irreversible status. If you cannot lift the curse, you will die completely after 31 days and 22 hours, unable to be resurrected. Host, your soul power is also losing 10 points per day. It is estimated that it will be gone in 5 days. The soul power he had inherited from Mediv was 385, and his humanity was 230%. This was more than enough. But if he was dead and couldn't be resurrected, there was no point in having any moral integrity left. In the end, he still had to save the Red Dragon Queen as soon as possible. Faced with this situation, Duque was also in a state of panic. The Red Dragon Queen in the history was indeed saved, But that was after the Alliance had dealt with the main Horde forces and entered the mopping up period. At that point in time, most of the Alliance's fallen areas had been recovered, especially the dwarf fortress Grim Battle where Alexstrasza was imprisoned. Although the fortress was still under the control of the Dragon Maw clan, most of the wetlands had been recovered. In that terrible swamp, not only were there beastmen but there were also all kinds of human liberators. For example, the Silver Hand from Lordaeron, and the dwarves from Iron Furnace Castle. Of course, most of them were the Wormhammer dwarf Griffin Knights from Eagle's Nest Mountain. And now, that place wasn't even the front line. It was definitely the enemy's rear. What did the enemy's rear mean? It meant that there was still the entire earthy highlands, where more than 200,000 beastmen were stationed. To go in and save the Red Dragon Queen would be more than 10 times more difficult. Duke had just caused the entire dragon riders to fall from the sky above the Alterac Palace. During the battle, he didn't see the chief of the Dragon Maw clan Zulu hid. Needless to say, he must have run back to Grim Battle to urge the Red Dragon Queen to give birth soon. It was not appropriate to say that he wanted to have a son soon. In order to meet the needs of war, the beastmen needed a large number of wyverns as mounts. Unfortunately, while the Creation Titans bestowed the WYRMS with unparalleled powerful bodies, they also weakened their fertility. In fact, the number of true descendants of giant dragons was so few that it made one's hair stand on end. In history, the red dragons that were used as mounts by the beastmen during the later stages of the war were actually the unfertilized eggs of other female giant dragons. Well, it was similar to the monthly ovulation of human females. However, Alexstrasza was forced to use magic to catalyze these unfertilized eggs into fighting wyverns. Due to their congenital defects, these red dragons could never grow into young dragons that were more than 1,000 years old. For the tribe, this was not important at all. It didn't matter if it was a genetic defect or a magical creation, as long as it could be ridden, it could deal with griffins in the air, and it could cleanse the ground with dragon breath. That was enough. Now, if Duque asked Kudrin to lead the Griffin Knights there, Kudrin would definitely agree with his character. But Duque could not cheat him. The dwarves were the humans' good brothers, and if they were to be wiped out like this, Duque would feel bad. After Duque and Sasha analyzed the situation, not only Sasha, but even Lang and the others' eyes dimmed. To be honest, Duque felt a little helpless. It felt like the more he changed the course of the world, the more he was destined to go against the will of the world, or the amazing ability of the River of Fate to correct things. He had a bad feeling that he was doomed to fail. However, when Duke looked around and saw Ryan, who was still alive and kicking, the Windstalker's third sister, Windstalker Sasha, who was wearing the emblem of the Stormwind Kingdom, and Gavin Rad and Alucia, who should have died tragically, were present, Duke could feel a faint sense of warmth. It was as if they were constantly reminding Duque that everything he did was worth it. Duque sighed. Tomorrow? If I don't hear from Aurelia and the others by tomorrow, I'll set off immediately. And please, even if you have to imprison Aurelia, don't let her catch up. I'm afraid she'll do something stupid. No, Duque, you don't understand, big sis. She'll definitely catch up. Then tell her that I have a 60% chance of coming back alive, Duque said decisively. 60%? That high. It wasn't just Sasha. Almost everyone present was stunned. From how they saw it, no matter who Duque brought with him this time, they would definitely die if they went deep into the enemy's territory. Who knew that Duque would say that he had a 60% chance? I know that this is a huge crisis for both me and the Alliance, but I can still use my magic. Through a history book I read in Karazhan, I know what imprisoned Alexstrasza. The most important thing is that I know how to solve this matter. This is something none of you have. The only problem is that I need to leave the Alliance's command for a long time. Anduin patted his chest and promised, that's easy. Leave the military matters to me. I'll try my best to put pressure on the Horde and attract their attention. Lang continued, I'll give you all the manpower that MI7 can deploy. Duque shook his head. I don't need bandits. Almost as soon as he said that, the light in Vanessa's eyes dimmed. Duque smiled. I promised your father that I'd take good care of you. If your father returns with success only to find that his daughter died because of an even riskier mission, I won't be able to rest easy even if I die. Vanessa didn't say anything. Duque continued, this time I've thought about it. I only need a few people to follow me. Anduin nervously took out a small notebook and prepared to record. The ones going with me are Gavin Rad and Windsor. Gavin Rad's eyes lit up when he heard that, and his face was filled with determination. Windsor, who had been entrusted with an important task for the first time, looked more eager. It wasn't her first time fighting. But it was the first time that she had to leave her two sisters to carry out such an important mission. The third name that Duque said made everyone confused. I also want to find a young earth mage in the Dalajan called Ronan. I think he'll bring me luck. If Duque hadn't lost his ability to cast spells, Duque himself would be strong enough. Why would he choose an earth mage as his follower? Alright. The mysterious Duque was as puzzling as ever. Chapter 464. The Rapid Stream Castle had almost fallen. Only one city was needed for the Horde's flag to be placed on top of the Rapid Stream Castle's palace. But the 2 or 3 seemingly narrow city districts in front of the palace had become a meat grinder for both the Alliance and the Horde. There was no such thing as a front, and the humans were playing hide-and-seek. They could pop their heads out of the rubble of any ruins, or even shoot an arrow straight at the orc's head without popping their heads out. It was not until the Horde broke through the outer walls of the Rapid Stream Castle and entered the city district that they were shocked to find that the entire mountain under the ancient capital of Thoradin the Great was almost hollowed out. Under the walls of the Rapid Stream Castle, there were tunnels that looked like spider webs. Many of the tunnel entrances were quite narrow, which the burly orcs could not enter at all. As a result, whenever the orcs attempted to storm the inner city, the road from the outer city to the inner city would be constantly harassed and attacked. The orcs could not transport any heavy siege weapons. Perhaps a bag of kerosene would be thrown out of nowhere and burn the catapults and siege vehicles to ashes. On the 5th day after Orgrim evacuated from Lordaeron, Rend Blackhand, who was in charge of attacking the Rapid Stream Castle, received an order. This order from the Great Chief made Rend Blackhand very unhappy, but he had to carry it out. Since it is an order from Zulud, let Zulud take care of things here. He received a reply. An hour later, the Rapid Stream Castle welcomed its destruction. The wind pressure generated by the flapping of the Red Dragon's wings caused further damage to the ancient capital that had been half destroyed for more than 2,000 years. The terrible storm caused by the flapping of the dragon's wings easily blew down all the buildings that were still relatively intact. The slightly older buildings were directly uprooted, and the loose walls made of mud bricks were blown into the air and disintegrated. In front of the palace, the defensive zone that had troubled the orc army for months was like a sandcastle that had been washed away by the waves. It was flattened in a few short breaths. "Forgive me," the dragon's deep voice of repentance came from the sky in the common language. Along with this voice, Tirani's abdomen bulged, then its chest, and finally its neck. Dense golden flame patterns formed by the draconic language appeared in the air in front of the giant dragon. For a moment, this light even surpassed the light of the sun. A destructive flame quickly expanded from that small cluster into a huge fireball that was even bigger than the entire house. The golden light completely shrouded the entire royal palace of Torrent Fort. The grayish-black palace was doused with lava-like flames. In the screams of every Riptide Castle resident who witnessed this scene, the palace melted. The huge blue stone was like a piece of cheese that was melted by the high temperature. It began to flatten, and a blazing unknown substance spread in all directions. The symbol of Riptide Castle was gone? The ancient capital of the Arajuo Empire, which had been passed down for over 2,000 years, was gone just like that. Talanistas looked a little weak, but the orc on his back roared loudly. The pitiful ancient dragon had no choice but to pull himself together. He aimed at a huge cave and spat out what was left of his dragon breath. It was as if a terrible volcano had erupted in the underground pit. The narrow tunnels that restricted the orcs from entering became the graves of the humans. The doors and boulders that restricted the entry of enemies collapsed like dominoes. Not only Tirani's but the other red dragons also followed the orcs' orders and quickly found a deep pit, spitting their dragon breaths into it. This situation was a bit like a syringe. With enough pressure from one side, the flames spread along the tunnel to all the space in the mountain. King Salash Trollbane, who had just arrived at the wall of Saladin, fell to his knees. It wasn't just him. Every Stromgarde warrior saw the golden flames shooting out from the ventilation holes on the cliff of the mountain where Riptide Castle stood. How many of the people inside could survive? Was it a slim chance of survival? Or was it 1 in 100? No. Tears of despair rolled down the determined faces of these mountain men. They watched their motherland, the Stromgarde kingdom, sink into darkness and burn in flames. Their loved ones and compatriots cried and struggled in pain. For a moment, almost everyone in Riptide Castle felt that everything was destroyed, whether it was hope or the road ahead. Riptide Castle was destroyed. This was the second capital to be destroyed since the establishment of the Alliance. It was also the third capital of the 7 human kingdoms to fall. This news spread throughout the entire Alliance within a day. The people of almost every surviving country trembled in fear. Among the remaining countries, only the Dalajan and Silvery Moon had the strongest magical defense. Perhaps they could withstand the destructive attacks of the giant dragons. But the rest were in doubt. Not to mention small countries like Kurtiras and Gilnis, even Lordaeron couldn't guarantee that they would be able to withstand it. For a moment, the urgency to save the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza reached an unprecedented peak. Every big shot of the Alliance was waiting for the results of Lordaeron's special forces. The results made all the big shots of the Alliance fearful. 48 human corpses were impaled by huge wooden stakes on the empty space outside the wall of Saladin. Looking at these human corpses wearing epic leather armor, most of the guards on the wall were at a loss. Only King Tarina's Menethil was so angry that he plucked out a few tufts of his beard. Lordaeron's surprise attack had failed. It was a complete and utter failure. The high-level bandits that Tarina's had sent were all killed. Not a single one managed to come back to report back to him. This was the most severe slap to Lordaeron's face. For a moment, Duque's act of saving himself and the Red Dragon Queen had attracted the attention of all the big shots of the Alliance. An uneasy feeling enveloped the Kirin Tor Council of Six. In the conference hall in the air there were no walls. Large amounts of light and dark clouds surrounded these high-level mages, flowing and changing constantly. Looking up, it seemed that even time had become faster. Only the dark gray marble floor, which was inlaid with diamond-shaped runes that symbolized the four major elements, gave this scene some semblance of reality. At this moment, the fiercest debate broke out in the conference hall. These usually elegant and scholarly counselors were now even more rowdy than antis in a wet market. I have no objections to supporting Duke Marcus. I have to admit that he's a great guy who can create miracles. But why did he name Ronan? Chapter 465. Ronan? A counselor shouted, Ronan? Hasn't he killed enough of his own people? 5 outstanding young Morningstar magicians died to his dangerous magic. He doesn't even have the right to wear a magician's robe anymore. He only brings danger, not hope. Even a goblin's bomb is more reliable than him. Another counselor agreed. Everyone knew that a goblin's bomb could explode at any time even if it was disguised as a handsome man lying in an ice cave. If it was someone from before he transmigrated, it would be the new era should I die happy 7. Although I believe that His Excellency Marcus can suppress this maverick, aren't you afraid that he will kill His Excellency Marcus ahead of time by putting him together with our Alliance star? A slightly chubby member of Parliament muttered. Yes. We can't trust him. We can't let that criminal go. The first counselor echoed. From start to finish, only 2 people were silent, quietly watching the 4 counselors argue. Soon they realized that the chairman and the 6th person were silent. Suddenly, the lively atmosphere began to cool down. Are you done arguing? Antonidas said leisurely, there are only 2 choices in front of us. The first is to gather all the strongest magicians in the Dalajan and Kuel Salis and kill Terranista. But I have to remind you that there is more than one ancient dragon in the Red Dragon army. Many of them are not controlled by the orcs and are hiding. Also, what role has the Red Dragon army played in the Tirisfal Parliament for the past 1,000 years? The 4 counselors did not speak. The counselors of the Tirisfal Parliament were all from the Silver Moon Parliament and the Kirin Tor Parliament. In the past 1,000 years, the Tirisfal Parliament and its guardians had maintained a very good relationship with the red, blue, green and bronze dragon races in terms of protecting the world. In a sense, the Red Dragon army was actually one of them. The second is to let Duke Marcus, who originally wanted to find Alexstrasza to save his life, carry out this perfect plan that can solve all problems in one go. I understand your concern for Sir Marcus, but, since he doesn't care about Ronan, why should we worry? Besides, I remember that we all owe Duque a favor. When Antonidas said this, the counselors all laughed dryly. That's right, these guys all had a share of the dragon skin and whatnot as casting materials. Of course, a certain counselor named Crasus didn't look too happy when he accepted the bribe. Crasus spoke, although Sir Marcus's name is a bit wrong, Ronan is not an earth wizard, but a morning star. However, this small detail isn't important. What's important is whether we can come up with a better remedy to increase the success rate of this operation. Antonidas suddenly laughed and said, didn't our deputy commander of the Alliance always suggest that in the battle against the Horde, apart from glory, we should also give material rewards to the real heroes who killed the enemy? Crasus immediately understood. The one who killed the most enemies in our alliance doesn't even have a staff. The old but experienced chairman chuckled. I can contribute an epic staff blueprint suitable for both Morning Star and Radiant Moon Magi. In fact, I even have a prototype that I can be proud of. Krasis continued, as for the cost, that's the Alliance's problem. We might as well set the standard higher. For example, killing 1,000 orc warriors to obtain this staff. Good idea. The other 4 counselors agreed. And so, the Alliance's first epic weapon to reward heroes was born. When Duque received the staff the next day, Duque was still a little confused. He blurted out, "Grand Marshal's battle staff." Krasis was taken aback. Duque had called out the staff's name in one go. After all, they had come up with the name last night in the Kirin Tor Council. They had originally wanted to call it a hero's staff. However, they felt that it didn't match up to Duque's status, so they simply called it the Marshal's staff. The warrior version was called the Marshal's two-handed warblade, which was forged by the dwarves of Steel Furnace Castle. After all, anyone who could kill 1,000 orc warriors was definitely not a nobody. Being promoted to a general or something was a sure thing. The counselors didn't feel that it was an offense to any country. After all, it meant that a soldier who didn't want to be a marshal wasn't a good soldier. Who knew that Duque would say it out loud? Duque also realized that he had let it slip. Fortunately, he had a chance to fix it. He pointed at the draconic words on the staff. This is what the draconic words mean. Does this staff have another name? Krasis became embarrassed. Compared to the elven magic that humans worshipped, Krasis instinctively felt that the magic of the ancient dragon race was more authentic and original. In order to make the staff look high-end, Krasis added a paragraph of draconic words before handing it over. He thought that no one would understand, but who knew that Duque would say it out loud? Krasis was surprised and pleasantly surprised. Sir Marcus, you know draconic words? A little. In reality, Duque didn't know **T. The system only translated 2 words for him. The truth of the matter was that the unique design of the staff had evoked the memories of a veteran player. The entire staff was white in color. The head of the staff was a chest-like horse's head, and on both sides of the horse's head was a pair of raised wings. There was a mysterious arcane power lingering at the tip of the staff, causing 4 white, mithril-shaped ornaments that looked like kite shields to revolve clockwise around the staff. Below it was a very Alliance-style ribbon, and then there was a brown handle and a translucent prismatic blue magic crystal at the end of the staff. Back in the day before Duque traveled to this world, he had farmed countless days and nights on the battlefield to get this cool staff. Suddenly obtaining this magic staff, Duque actually had a kind of uncontrollable excitement. It was full of memories. My years. My youth. This reminds me of the days when I got the staff and ran towards the sunset in the wild, hunting down the horde. Kill. Or be killed. Honor kills or be killed by honor kills. He still remembered the crazy days when a silly vice leader called Two Swords was killed by the horde at 3 in the morning while picking up girls in the game. Then the guild mobilized 400 people to go online and fight the horde. He still remembered, I digressed. Once people traveled to another world, it was easy to recall the past. At this time, Krasis asked, "Sir, do you have any special information about the Red Dragon Queen being captured?" Chapter 466. Krasis was actually a little nervous. As one of the male dragons who admired Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, his heart was broken when his queen was captured and the entire Red Dragon army was controlled and enslaved by the filthy beastmen. As an ancient red dragon, Alexstrasza's influence on his mind was not as great as that of other low-level red dragons. The premise here was that he did not contact the queen telepathically. In fact, many ancient red dragons avoided being enslaved by the beastmen by deliberately avoiding telepathic contact. But recently, even without direct contact, Krasis could feel that his beloved queen was inevitably weakening, both mentally and physically. This was a bad sign. Krasis was very anxious. He contacted Duque to see what Duque needed. Secondly, he wanted to see if this Duque, who was known as the strongest commander in the Alliance and had almost earned the title of Mastermind, had any special information or ideas. After all, he had lost contact with the Red Dragon army and could only guess a lot of things. I don't have any accurate information. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, Krasis' face was filled with disappointment that could hardly be concealed. I see. Duke looked at Krasis' seemingly calm but incomparably disappointed expression. He stopped teasing Krasis. But there's still a direction. Can you tell me? I once witnessed Her Majesty Alexstrasza's heroism in Karazhan. So, from the beginning, I did not think that ordinary creatures could control the incomparably powerful Her Majesty. Makes sense. Krasis nodded. So, I flipped through the ancient books of Karazhan and found this record about the dragons. This is a very long story. In the ancient war, the races of Azeroth, led by the Pentashade Guardian, united to resist the invasion of the Burning Legion. The Pentashade Guardian even created an extremely powerful divine artifact that killed all the millions of demons of the Burning Legion in one go. When Duque said this, Krasis could not help but breathe faster. As the Red Dragon Queen's youngest admirer, as a young dragon, he had not experienced that earth-shattering battle. However, this did not prevent him from learning about it from his elders. Speaking of the war, there was one thing that couldn't be avoided. It was something that shamed the entire dragon race. The dragon soul? Or more precisely, the devil soul? I knew it was devil's soul, Krasis said through gritted teeth. Then he realized that he was too excited. Sorry, I was too excited. However, as an ally of the Red Dragon army for more than 1,000 years, it's a cruel thing for us to fight the Red Dragons. Duque smiled and pretended to understand. He continued, of course this is just speculation. I wasn't sure. After all, I had to see the real thing to know. However, what I'm thinking is that if it's the demon's soul, I have to inform the other Dragon Kings to deal with this matter because I'm worried that this is a conspiracy by the Wing of Death, Nisario. The speaker had the intention and the listener had the intention. Even if a certain red dragon still didn't know that the other party was a transmigrator who was even more of a fraud than a fraud, it still didn't prevent a certain dragon from having a good impression of fraud. Krasis became more and more certain that Duque had a very good chance of successfully saving Alexstrasza. Marcus, what are you going to do? Du shrugged. I'll just play it by ear. This answer made Krasis want to vomit blood. If it were someone else, Krasis would have definitely slapped them into the wall with Dragon Claw Swipe. However, the one in front of him was Duque, known as the most far-sighted and wisest sage and commander in the entire alliance. Moreover, because the real dragons had an almost infinite lifespan, he had more spare time than other great mages to study trivial matters, such as the rise of Duque. Krasis found that Duque had the temperament of a fraud. In particular, Duque's ability to see through appearances was even rarer. The conspiracy that the Burning Legion shaman had painstakingly hidden for hundreds of years was actually seen through by a young man. This wasn't talent, then what was it? Even though it was a bit irrational, Krasis's intuition told him that betting on Duque was the right choice. Krasis bowed deeply to Duque. Thank you for your frankness, sir. You didn't have to tell me at all. No. You're also half a master to Ronin. I'm just telling you not to worry. Ronin. Krasis felt a bit strange when Ronin was mentioned. Even though he had been secretly training Ronin so that he could master the technique of sneaking into grim battle, he still felt strange when Duque suddenly asked for him. He forgot that a fraud was a fraud. Sorry, actually, I dreamt of Ronin and Her Majesty Alexstrasza. I think this is a sign from the goddess of fate. I did some research and it turns out that there really is a mage named Ronin in the Dalajan, so well, that's it. If you don't think it's suitable, I can give up on summoning Mage Ronin. Krasis was dumbfounded, but he soon accepted it. A sign of fate. Such a high-end and mysterious power. When Krasis connected the fact that Duque had miraculously defeated Sargeras, he couldn't help but wonder if Duque was the so-called child of fate. Alright, it just so happens that Ronin committed a crime. Even though he's currently in detention and under investigation, he's probably willing to use this method to prove himself. Not to mention that he's working with the Alliance's hero, Duke Marcus. I just hope that he won't be so careless and drag you down with him. Don't worry. I'm very good at instant casting, Ice Barrier. Krasis was speechless. The matter was settled. Half an hour later, in a room in a side tower of Violet Castle, a mage was waiting for his latest punishment. He looked about him with boredom. There was a brocade hanging on the thick stone wall in front of him. The violet area in the middle was embroidered with a complicated golden eye that seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. Below the eye were 3 golden daggers pointing to the ground. This flag of the Dalajan, this symbol, had always been raised high during the war, fulfilling their mission to protect the Alliance, even though not every Kirin Tor member fulfilled their mission with honor. He was a little anxious because the latest news was that he was actually connected to one of the Alliance's 2 heroes, Duke Marcus. He wasn't sure if this was a blessing. Chapter 467. Ronin raised his head and gazed into the distance with his deep green eyes under his thick red hair. There was a scar on his nose from a fellow apprentice, but no matter how skillful the culprit was, Ronin had never thought of fixing it. Even so, Ronin did not look ugly. He had a straight and elegant chin and a sharp face. His arched eyebrows made him look like he was full of sarcasm and suspicion. Most people were superficial. Before understanding the beauty of the other party's soul, they would often reject the other party from the bottom of their hearts because of the bad habits brought about by the appearance association. Ronan was treated the same way. His appearance had caused him trouble in communicating with the higher-ups more than once. Every time he tried to alleviate all of this, his ferocious expression and slightly exaggerated body language could only play a negative role in the situation. He wore an elegant midnight blue robe. His tall and handsome figure was very eye-catching even to the mages. Ronan was silent. He had sacrificed 5 outstanding companions in the last mission. To him, who was waiting for an interrogation, any extra words would only make the accusations against him more severe. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at the door again, waiting for a mage to come in and speak to him. An interrogation or a direct sentence from an important figure. The door, which seemed to be made of solid metal, disappeared without a sound. It was the same for a door made of magic. It was controlled by a magic program that normal mages could not understand. The Kirin Tor Parliament had used this cage system to imprison many criminals in the Violet Prison under the Dalajan. It had been like this for hundreds of years. The sudden light from the door made Ronan turn his head and close his eyes. But quickly he opened his eyes and looked straight at the door. To his surprise, it was not the intimidating inquisitors and their assistants, nor was it Krasus, who was half his mentor. Instead, it was a young sorcerer with a tuft of silver hair. His hair did not look like it was dyed, but it did not match his young face. Ronan looked at the person who came. It was Duque. Duque was also sizing Ronan up. He saw a pair of deep green eyes that were as calm as a lake before a storm. There was no fear, no anger, and no hatred. He could clearly see the ugly scar on Ronan's nose, as well as the helplessness under that seemingly vicious expression. Not only that, it was hard to even find anger. This kind of incongruous feeling made it difficult for Duque to connect the person in front of him with the glorious Kirin Tor Archmage in history. This was the first time Duque had seen such an expression since he transmigrated. It was an expression that could only be seen after one had been abandoned by one's teacher, rebuked by one's peers, insulted by the world, and made enemies with the entire world. If it was an ordinary person, most of them would bend their back and lower their head in front of a high-ranking person, trying their best to show a humble and pitiful posture. But Ronan didn't. From the moment he opened the door until now, his posture had been as straight as a pine tree. He did not raise his chin, nor did he lower his gaze. He just calmly looked straight into Duque's eyes. That's right. Ronan was not afraid of death, nor was he afraid of being questioned. He was only waiting for the result of his trial. Was it eternal oblivion or redemption? Hello, Ronan. My name is Duke Marcus. Nice to meet you. Duke Marcus. The 1.5-year battle at the Door of Darkness had made Duque's name known across the 2 continents. For the first time, Ronan was stunned. Why would such a famous person come to see him? My apologies, please forgive my stupidity, my lord. I don't understand how a sinner like me can help you, my lord. Or should I say, aren't you afraid of bringing misfortune upon seeing someone like me? Duque laughed. If it really is the power of the goddess of misfortune, perhaps anyone who looks at it will meet with misfortune. Duque replied, but your degree of misfortune is nothing to me, who has suffered the curse of the burning legion Sargeras and only has a month left to live. If you can really bring misfortune, then I should be dying in front of you right now. Do you want to count down? 3, 2, 1. I'm dead. I don't think I'm dead yet. Looks like your misfortune is useless against me. Do you want to follow me for a while? Ronan was tongue-tied. He couldn't keep up with the thoughts of this person in front of him. He felt like he was losing his ability to think. When he had been imprisoned by the Kirin Tor Internal Affairs and dragged away like a bag of trash, he had thought that his terrible life as a wizard, or even this cursed life, was about to be liberated. But when the door opened, Ronan found out that what awaited him was not the result of execution or the destruction of all his magic circuits. He would be unable to use magic for the rest of his life. Instead, he was going to follow a person who only appeared in legends? Ronan was stunned. Duque scratched his head. Looks like my reputation isn't working. Then, for the sake of the Alliance, the humans, the dwarves, and the High Elves, can you help me? This is a mission with a very high level of danger. When Duque said this, Ronan suddenly came to a realization. Ronan lowered his head for the first time and then quickly raised it again. There were a few more tears at the corner of his eyes. He shouted at the top of his lungs, I'm willing. I'm willing to do anything. I don't need to make any contributions. As long as I can wash away the sins on my body, so that I don't have to think about the faces of the victims' families every night, and make my heart feel better, I'm willing even if I have to die. Duque was stunned and then came to a realization. Azeroth's history still had its original momentum. But this was different from the original timeline. At the original timeline, Ronan had gone to save the Red Dragon Queen. That was after the war had ended and he had been imprisoned for a long time. At that time, Ronan had already calmed down, or perhaps his heart was dead. But now, after Ronan had committed a crime, he was in the most pain and his conscience was at its worst. It was as if he was in front of a cliff, unable to find his way out. Just as he was venting his pain, Duque had extended a simple wooden bridge to him from the other side of the cliff. Even though it looked unstable and had all sorts of questions, there was no doubt that this was Ronan's only salvation. Duque lowered his head and sighed, "Ronan, if you follow me from now on, let me tell you why your magic always goes out of control." Chapter 468. What did it feel like to guide someone who was only half a step away from becoming a mage god? Felt good. Felt really good. It was like traveling to the past and teaching Edison how to invent and think about life. It was like teaching him to apply for a patent for his invention. If Ronan was a girl, it would be as bad as teaching a little girl who believed in Santa Claus to go to Mount Akina to watch an old driver drive. Fortunately, Ronan was male. Just like that, Duque's rescue team was formed, carrying the will and hope of the entire alliance. This was not an exaggeration at all. Tyrannisa's frontal attack put a lot of pressure on the alliance. They wanted to gather their army and counterattack in one go, taking back the Earthy Highlands first. In the end, more than 200,000 troops were blocked by an ancient dragon at the Wall of Thoradin, unable to advance. If not for the Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer dwarves showing enough ferocity to fight, Tyrannis might have charged straight into the army camp behind the Wall of Thoradin and washed it with dragon breath. The ruler of the skies was just that domineering. Duque, Gavin Rad, Sasha, Ronan, and Marion Firewing, who was forced into the team. This team of 5 seemed to be very low-key, but it had gathered quite a lot of big names. A deputy commander of the Alliance, a first-generation paladin, a ranger general, a future great mage and a Silvermoon counselor. "Why did you come?" Duque asked Marion, the beautiful female high elf mage. "For the future of the Alliance. Duke is such a young and promising member of the Alliance. If he were to die under some terrible curse, it would be such a pity. This would also damage the relationship between Kuel Salas and the Alliance. The Sun King and the Alliance agreed that only you are the best bridge between us and the Alliance." At this point, Marion rolled her eyes and continued, "Besides, isn't saving the beautiful queen from the hands of the evil and filthy orcs the standard template of a legendary story that can be sung and moved to tears? Is it wrong for me to want to be a part of the legendary story?" Marion spoke confidently and righteously. "But you don't have to sacrifice a Silvermoon counselor? Are we going to lose a deputy commander?" She was so reasonable that Duque couldn't find any room to refute. "We're going deep into the enemy's rear. No one will serve you." Duque, who had long heard of the debauched lifestyle of the High Elven mages, especially the Silvermoon counselor, wanted to give them a heads up. "I volunteered to join. Even if I die in the wetlands, it's my own business. There are many people in Silvermoon City eyeing my position, waiting for me to die there. Don't worry, I can take care of myself. I won't let them get what they want." A certain Duke could only pinch his nose and accept it. Let's hope Marion won't be a burden. It wasn't that Duque didn't believe in Marion's strength, but he wasn't sure of her actions. Just like that, the 5-man team set off. Because the entire Earthy Highlands and the wetlands across the sea belonged to the front line, it would be a joke to fly directly to grim battle on a griffin. After the discussion of the Alliance's bigwigs and staff officers, they decided to fly to the Stormwind fleet on the other side of the Paladin Bay. Then, when night fell, they would use a small boat to land on the west coast of the wetlands. Dreams were plentiful, but reality was harsh. Duque didn't expect that there could be conflicts between his own people and people from all over the world. Duque suddenly realized that wherever Marion was, Sasha would definitely sit next to him. It had been like this since they started riding griffins. Sasha insisted on riding with him no matter what, but in the end, Marion and Gavin Rad shared the same griffin. It was even more so on the boat. Yes, like a mother bird protecting her chicks, she spread her wings and stared at the enemy, unusually vigilant. "Sasha, we're all partners on missions together." "No, Duque, you don't understand. This kind of woman is a scourge that eats people up without spitting out the bones. I'm going to watch over you in place of my sister." Sasha said this in front of Marion, giving her a provocative look. Marion didn't care at all. This is Windrunner's misunderstanding of the Silver Moon Council. No, Duque, Marion is one of the 7 sisters of the Silver Moon Salon, a famous socialite. If I had known that she was also a member, I would have firmly opposed it. It seems like you have a deep prejudice against me. In the salon we discussed high art including poetry and music. Liar. Keep lying. Moreover, Sir Marcus didn't even set a marriage with your sister. Even if I wanted to pursue him, I would do it openly. With that, Marion giggled and puffed out her chest. It was a very sexy mage robe with a heart hollowed out at the chest. Just like that, it immediately revealed how shocking the deep ravine was. Moreover, so what if we have a marriage? We high elves don't pay attention to so-called etiquette. Polygamy is also a very common thing. It's just that there can only be one who inherits the position and reputation of the elder. So, even if it's you, Sasha, you can still steal your sister's man. You're shameless. Sasha was furious. Especially when Sasha turned her head and saw that Ronan's eyes were a little straight, she only retracted her gaze with a red face when she saw it. Gavin Rat. This noble wastrel holy knight didn't hide his admiration for Marion at all, in the form of whistling. Originally, for a moment, Sasha had lost all hope in Duque's willpower. However, the 2 ladies were stunned. Duque was very calm. He looked at Marion's pair of peaks, calm and serene, without excitement or embarrassment. It was as if he was admiring a passable work of art. Duque, why did you? Sasha was stunned. Duque blinked. This is a very common attire. That's right. This level of exposure can make a veteran of 10 terabytes of romantic action movies like me get excited and have a nosebleed? You're looking down on me too much. Even elementary school animals wouldn't freeze at this level. Yes, the righteousness on the face is to hide the filth in the heart. That's right. That's it. It just so happened that Mediv still had a lot of moral integrity left, and Duke now looked like a saint. Sasha was a little surprised. To avoid alarming the tribe, the ship chose to dock at night. A speedboat sent the group of 5 to the shore in the night, probably near the future Menethil port. Then a group of sailors sent them and their horses ashore. After getting off the ship and stepping onto the shore of Cosmodon, the group entered an environment where beastmen walked everywhere and dragons flew in the sky. So, they bickered a little on the ship, but once they got off, everyone quietened down. Chapter 469. On the battlefield, the situation was extremely heated. After suppressing the alliance at the Saladin Wall, the Horde desperately needed a diversion to vent their anger. Of course, Orgrim found one. Of course, it was Ghoul Dan's betrayal. Orgrim immediately mobilized the 2 brothers, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand, and led 50,000 men to chase after Ghoul Dan's Twilight Hammer and Storm Predator clans. Apart from that, there were also many Dragon Knights. The chairman was right. To defend against foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Orgrim did this in a comical manner. He wanted to quickly deal with Ghoul Dan and then endure until winter. When more orcs came from the Dark Portal, he would regroup next spring and attack Lordaeron again. After all, with the Earthy Highlands as a bridgehead, there would be no need to fight those disgusting naval battles and land battles. If all else failed, they would open a road to the hinterlands through the high-altitude mountains between the Earthy Highlands and the hinterlands. It all depended on how the alliance defended the long front. Unfortunately, his opponent was Duque. Duke's goal was to kill as much as possible of the tribe's strength. Even when he was not here, there were still legends about him. Duke, who was no longer around, but his plan still had epic-making guidance. That's right, Orgrim's last 10,000 men did indeed cross the Alterac Mountains day and night to avoid the alliance's pursuit. They crossed the entire hinterlands and returned to the Seaviewing Cliff. At the Seaviewing Cliff, Ghoul Dan did indeed destroy many ships, but there were still many left. After 3 days of hard labor, Orgrim finally managed to gather enough ships for 13,000 orcs and 1,000 trolls to cross the sea. Since he sent out the Blackhand brothers, Orgrim naturally wanted to return to the wetlands. After reorganizing the clans, he would regroup and stabilize the front line of the Earthy Highlands. Orgrim gritted his teeth and swore that he would learn from the humans and build a bunker. That's right. He would build a fortress on the east side of the Saladin Wall that the humans would have to sacrifice 100,000 lives to take down. Unfortunately, his grand plan was not realized before he suffered a heavy blow. Thinking about it, Duque knew that Orgrim could only return to the southern continent from the hinterlands, so how could he not have a backup plan? Moreover, It seemed like the heavens were not interested in protecting these foreign butchers of the horde. Just half an hour after Orgrim's fleet set sail, they ran into a storm. In this day and age, any sailor with a modicum of experience would act according to the weather. Unfortunately, Orgrim's subordinates were all muscular men who relied on brute force to conquer the sea. They acted recklessly and then they were punished. The gale raised a terrifying triangular wave that was at least 10 meters tall, easily capsizing all the small newly built transport ships. Only the transport ships that were built earlier and in better condition barely survived the storm. However, after the storm subsided, Orgrim was ambushed by the Nagas and the Murlocs before he could even calculate his losses. Ha! In the name of our master, Duke Marcus, kill all those green-skinned creatures. Vara, the furious scale Naga priest, laughed heartily. Gala, kill all the orcs. Murloc prophet Morgur yelled. Countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the sea from the depth of 10 meters. The storm had little effect on the bottom of the sea. Basically, one could not feel the wind and waves 10 meters below the surface of the sea. Just now, the merfolk were simply picking up the human heads, drowning those who had drowned or those who had been thrown to the surface of the sea. Then, they cut off the heads and returned to the place designated by Duke to present the heads as a tribute. Now, countless Murlocs rushed to the surface of the water with crude weapons and climbed onto the low orc transport ships. They bullied the orcs who had been fighting against the storm for several hours and had exhausted their strength. They shook the not too wide orc transport ships, causing the orcs to lose their balance. On the shaking ships, the heavy weapons that the orcs were so proud of became a burden. One after another, the transport ships were captured by the Murlocs. No, Orgrim screamed at the top of his lungs. However, he could only watch the scene unfold from the flagship. There was nothing he could do. The great chief never thought that the last elites of the Blackrock clan would be buried here. After all, this was the last group of Blackrock orcs who had fought against the Draenei. They had rich experience and the strongest physique. They were the elites of the elites. They defeated the Draenei who played with the Holy Light. They were the vanguard of the expedition to Azeroth. They had killed more than 100,000 humans in the Elven Forest, killed the long-eared High Elves, destroyed Alterac, fought under Lordaeron, and attacked the north camp of the Alliance. They had never surrendered to any enemy, but because they were not good at swimming they were going to die here? Great Chief, let's go. Torghese of the Dragonmaw clan rode his dragon and swooped down at high speed. He let the dragon hover in the air. The dragon turned its snake-like neck and let out a threatening roar at the Murlocs in the distance. Unfortunately, there was only one dragon, and it had followed to cover the Great Chief. A normal red dragon did not have the stamina to stay in the air for so long. Only a dragon over 1,000 years old could cast an anti-gravity spell on itself, allowing its huge body to hover in the air effortlessly. Great Chief, let's go. The damned Murlocs are already digging at the bottom of the ship, Orgrim's personal guard captain Hamark said. Dragons were the rulers of the sky but not the king of the sea. No matter how strong the dragon's breath was, it could not evaporate the entire endless sea. As for the Murlocs digging at the bottom of the ship under Mogur's command, the dragon could not do anything. No, I can't abandon you. Orgrim's eyes turned red as he looked at his brothers who had accompanied him for more than 10 years. No, you must abandon us for the sake of the tribe. The orc warriors stared at Orgrim as if they weren't looking at their great chieftain, but at the last flickering flame of hope in the wasteland of despair and destruction. For the tribe. This sentence deeply pierced Orgrim's heart. It was not that these brothers of the Blackrock tribe did not know how terrible the situation was, nor did they not know who caused their world to wither and die, but they still silently raised their weapons and continued to fight. They did this for only one reason, for the tribe. Yes, they were wrong. They trusted the wrong ghoul, Dan. They also started a wrong war. But for the continuation of the tribe, they could only make mistakes again and again. But no one regretted it because of the same reason, for the tribe. Chapter 470. Orgrim was agitated. Orgrim, who had returned to the wetlands alone, was almost in a frenzy. He mobilized all the resources at his disposal and launched an irrational attack on the Alliance. In Dan Moro, Orgrim mobilized 100,000 beastmen laborers, ignoring the harassment of the dwarven assault team and forcefully breaking open the mountain. If the Iron Forge relied on the entire mountain, then the tribe would use brute force to destroy the entire mountain. In the wetlands, Orgrim stayed in the grim battle fortress for 3 days. The news that came out was that the furious chief had the beastman warlock Necros inflict the cruelest soul torture on the Red Dragon Queen. In the end, Orgrim managed to squeeze out a few red dragon fighters who were in hiding. Karantes, Gahiren, Christasa, Ilstrasa. 2 males and 2 females. Unable to endure the faint waves of pain that their queen transmitted through her soul, the 4 dragons jumped out on their own and landed in the tribe's bowl. As a result, the tribe now had 5 ancient dragons, or at least close to the ancient level. These 5 giant dragons harassed the Alliance's defense line day and night. The entire Alliance was in a heated argument over whether or not to kill these red dragons who had become enemies. Did the Alliance have no backup plan? Definitely not. In a throne meeting at the command center near South Shore, King Salas of Stromgard, whose country had officially been destroyed, was furious. Bang, bang, bang. He slammed the table. Those damned red dragons have fallen into the abyss of evil. I don't want to hear anything about being kind. The truth is that these giant lizards went crazy for their queen. They burned down our home and our capital. 5 dragons. They are enough to destroy every city on this road except for Dalajan and Silvery Moon. Every one of them understood Salas's rage. King Lang and General Haas, whose country had also fallen and their capital destroyed, resonated deeply. King Zeon Grayman of Gilneas was the most shocked. Among the remaining Alliance capitals, his home was the weakest and closest. What are we waiting for? If we gather all the advanced mages from the Dalajan and Kuel Salas, we won't have any problem killing these dragons. Antonidas and Prince Kaeldats, who was attending the meeting as a representative, had the darkest faces. In the end, it was Antonidas who spoke. If they are willing to land and fight us, we can still kill these 5 red dragons. There are 2 problems. First, will they obediently land on the ground and bombard us? Everyone's expression turned ugly. Secondly, before you make this decision, please take a look at the list of dragons we have collected about the Red Dragon Legion. I must remind you that this list is not complete. There were 40 to 50 red dragon names displayed on the projection screen. Half of them were male and half were female. At the end of the name, the age of the dragon was also roughly stated. Dragons were divided into 12 levels according to their age, starting from the weakest hatchlings to the archaic dragons like Alexstrasza, also known as the strongest guardian dragons of the primordial dragons. Basically, for pure-blooded dragons, age was a symbol of strength. Looking at such a large group of dragon brothers, sisters, from the very old to the primordial dragons, even the most arrogant king would lose his temper. Then what do? Wait for death one by one? The old Zeon spread his hands in despair. If Duque can save the Red Dragon Queen. Enjuin Lothar whispered. Kudrin Wildhammer shouted, isn't it just a fortress? Find a cloudy night with no moonlight, I'll gather all the Wildhammer dwarves and mount a griffin for a surprise attack. Krasis, who was beside Antonidas, finally couldn't help but speak. Please, do you think that Queen Alexstrasza, who participated in the Primordial War and killed tens of thousands of demons, is tied up in a fortress by a thumb-thick chain, waiting for you to rescue her? Then what's going on? Dwarves had always been the negative example of the word patient. Kudrin had a look of, I'll give you 10 seconds to solve the riddle, and if you don't tell me the answer I'll flip the table. Krasis added, Sir Marcus isn't very sure himself, but he has a direction. Krasis didn't dare to say the word demon soul, because he had a bad feeling, as if someone was manipulating Alexstrasza's fall. What the hell, in the end we still have to trust that brat Duque. King Zeon muttered. King Tarinas narrowed his eyes. Our vice commander has always done a good job. Why can't we trust a hero who has proven himself to the world? During this period of time, the cleanup of the horde in the Tirisful Glades was quite effective. There were already 15,000 orcs who had their heads chopped off. Tashin's orc head at the north gate of Lordaeron was not a lie. Zeon snorted, tacitly agreeing. The big shots of the Alliance still felt quite helpless. They didn't expect that in the end they could only rely on Duque. How ironic. Hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't advance, and they could only wait for a young man who might die to save himself, the whole Alliance, and the whole world. Duke wasn't too clear about what was going on in the outside world. He could only understand what was going on in the outside world through magic communication when he stopped to set up camp. Duque didn't dare to send too many messages, he was afraid that he would be detected. Some dragons were quite sensitive to magic fluctuations. He wasn't sure how many dragons in the Red Dragon army were actually working for the orcs, or were just doing their jobs. Duque didn't dare to take the risk. 4 days had passed. In this wetland full of swamps, the biggest threat was nothing more than annoying mosquitoes. Don't think that rolling around on the grass on a summer night is very romantic. When the mosquitoes swarmed you within a few minutes and stung all your exposed skin, you wouldn't be able to cry even if you wanted to. Of course, as a college student with some common sense, he prepared garlic and sulfur in advance. Garlic repelled mosquitoes and sulfur repelled snakes and bugs. While Windsor was a ranger, she loved nature. Mosquitoes were a woman's natural enemy. At first, only Duque and Marion used their tents. Later, in order to save sulfur, Marion and Duque's tents were next to each other. Windsor, on the other hand, squeezed into Duque's tent. Don't think that anything could happen. With so many third wheels around, you could turn around and everyone would know. If you didn't look at the terrible swamp nearby, the constantly changing scenery made the journey quite poetic. Thanks to the swamp that could swallow people whole, the orcs weren't as vigilant as expected. Chapter 471. Ronan, I actually think that your teacher is a bit lousy. While resting, Duke was hiding under the shade of a tree as he complained. No, teacher treats me very well. Being abandoned by his teacher was a pain in Ronan's heart. He could not describe the feeling of being abandoned by the entire world. He answered Duque's question with an argument that even he could not convince himself. No, I mean, didn't he see the structure of your magic circuit? He actually gave you such a trashy magic circuit model? It's a miracle that you were able to reach the Morning Star realm. Ronan was shocked. Luoning was shocked. He had only cast spells twice and revealed the magic circuits on his arm. The magic circuit that could be seen on the skin was only the tip of the iceberg of the magic circuit in a wizard's body. It was only about 1%. How could Duque say that it was a miracle that he was able to reach the Morning Star realm? Ronan did not believe Duque alone, but before Duque, Crasus, who was like half a teacher to him, had told him so. Ronan was conflicted. If Ronan was said to be hesitant at first, then Duque's next words shocked him. Did you realize that while others could operate the arcane magic circuit in the same way without any problems, when you used it yourself, the arcane energy would rush out like a wild horse? Yes. Ronan, who was sitting on the ground, lowered his head, almost burying it between his knees. His appearance made Duque feel awkward. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a dog that had lost its owner. To be honest, Marion, who had not paid much attention to Ronan, did not understand why Duque would care so much about a wizard with such poor skills and no future. In Marion's eyes, even a high elf apprentice would be better than Ronan. Ronan's chaotic arcane aura was not surging, but it was always in a state of activation. It reminded Marion of those idiots who had absorbed too much energy from the Sunwell and self-destructed. Marion was waiting to watch a good show. Duque's decision, however, was unexpected. Do you want to try my magic circuit model? It came from Antonidas, but I modified him a little. Luoning was stunned. Marion was stunned as well. The magic circuit model was one of the mage's greatest secrets. The strength of a mage was directly related to his magic circuit. Duque actually gave it away just like that? Duque softly chanted an incantation and transferred a series of runes and circuit models into Luoning's mind in the most direct way. Almost at the same time, Ronan let out a fanatical cry of surprise. The more complicated a magic circuit was, the better it would be. Of course, the simpler it was, the more useful it would be. The most important thing was that it had to be suitable for him. A person with heart disease would not be able to ride the fiercest horse. Similarly, a person with insufficient aptitude should obediently ride the slowest horse, or even a donkey. Ronan's mouth was wide open. It was the arcane throne. Ronan wasn't strong, but he didn't lack insight. He almost instantly recognized that this model was definitely from Antonidas. He lightly simulated it in his mind and immediately confirmed that it was the arcane throne of Antonidas, the chief archmage. But it was also different. Antonidas was most famous for his ice magic, so his arcane throne was the foundation of Ice Crown. The arcane throne that Ronan obtained, however, abandoned all external output and completely used arcane magic to serve arcane magic. Luoning was inexplicably shocked and cried out, "Duque, how did you know that I'm most proficient in arcane magic?" Duque smiled. "I could tell at a glance." Well, from Snowstorm Daddy's description of you, he could tell at a glance. This gift is too precious. Duque, however, shook his head. First of all, this isn't the complete, arcane throne. This is just a model to inspire you and provide you with reference. I'm just giving you some pointers so that you can see your own path clearly. Your previous model was too lousy and couldn't make use of your characteristics at all. Those guys also overemphasized the skills of controlling magic, which is a waste of your talent. Talent? Yes. The magic output of your arcane circuit is at least 50 times that of a mage of the same level, so when you cast spells, you only feel that your magic power suddenly rushes out, and all the skills you learned are useless. The result is loss of control and explosion. For example, your arcane impact with one layer is like someone else stacking 10 layers, and the effect becomes arcane explosion. Luo Ning raised his head and stared at Duque in shock. He was completely stunned. Duque pointed out the crux of his problem, leaving no room for him to refute. Then I need to, Duque said earnestly. First of all, you need to get used to your magic power output. Just use it as powerful as possible. If you can use Arcane Missile Storm, don't use Arcane Missile. If you can use Arcane Explosion, don't use Impact. Then you can slowly adjust your magic circuit and find the balance between power and control. Then is there any way? No, you have to find your characteristics first. You have to know who you are. Only by understanding your abilities and talents in all aspects can you start to find the direction of your development. That is the path that belongs to you. All the magic training in the Daligen is actually just a method. However, that method is for ordinary magic apprentices and mages. It's not for you who is too talented. I understand. Luo Ning stood up and bowed deeply to Duque. You always failed because you used the wrong method. The method varies from person to person. Only by following the path that belongs to you can you find the method that suits you. But the method that suits you doesn't necessarily mean that you will reach the end of the magic path. After all, everyone's destination is completely different. Duque raised his hand lightly. In an instant, 9 magic energy balls appeared above Duque's head. Arcane ice and fire. 3 different types of power merged harmoniously in Luo Ning's hand, turning into 3 frostfire arcane energy balls. Everyone could feel the shocking destructive power contained in these small balls. However, no one could feel the power spreading from a distance. Under Luo Ning and Marian's gazes, Duque stopped the fusion and cycle of magic, slowing down the entire cycle. The terrifying power dissipated silently, and the surrounding magic waves quickly calmed down. After 3 breaths, not a single trace of magic could be seen in the air. After you recognize yourself, I can discuss the way of control with you. Chapter 472. Sasha was about to go crazy. On one hand, she couldn't contact her 2 sisters. If Aurelia and Servanas received the message, they would definitely rush over as soon as possible. However, the message she and her rangers sent to Tirisful Forest was like a stone sinking into the ocean. She wasn't worried about her 2 sisters' safety. In her heart, as long as they entered the forest, they would be the strongest. It was obvious that they were being held back by a target. She guessed correctly, it had to be Grom Hellscream. Her 2 sisters were still brooding over the fact that they couldn't take down that fierce orc even after working together in the first battle of South Shore. Their stubbornness caused Duque to lack powerful supporters. On the other hand, if Duque and the other 3 guards remained silent from start to finish, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. If they focused their thoughts on the dangerous mission that they were about to face, Sasha wouldn't feel troubled. The problem was that Duque's journey was too leisurely. If one ignored the fact that this was enemy territory, there would be at least 7 or 8 waves of flying dragons flying overhead every day. This was like an outing. Ever since they'd come ashore, they'd only traveled a little more than 120 kilometers in 4 days. This was even slower than the normal marching speed of a human army. The swamp terrain was a little difficult to walk on. At least there were many paths that were obviously made by orcs. These paths led in all directions. As long as they headed east, they definitely wouldn't lose their way. However, Duque just rode on his horse, joking with Marian and Gavin Rad. He occasionally gave Ronan some pointers, but he refused to speed up. Everyone could see that Duque's hair was getting whiter by the day. The small tuft on his forehead turned white at the temples. Sasha also accidentally saw that the skin on the inside of Duque's left arm was starting to wrinkle like an old man's. Sasha finally couldn't take it anymore. She pulled Duque behind a small hill and said, "Duque, did you notice? Your hair is rapidly turning silver." "Isn't silver good? Silver is quite pretty. Look, don't you have silver hair too?" Duque seemed to be joking as he played with a strand of Sasha's silver hair. This was supposed to be a very intimate act. Normally, Sasha would have minded it, but she couldn't care less now. "Are you still joking? Duque, why aren't you nervous at all? Your life is counting down?" On Duque's face, there was an enigmatic calmness that Sasha could not imagine. "I don't know what you think of this war. I think that since I joined the Alliance's army, the moment I joined, every Alliance soldier should be mentally prepared to sacrifice themselves. Yes, I was afraid of it too, and I didn't want to die in agony after being tortured. But since I'm shouldering the future and fate of the 3 races with Noxus, I can't show timidity in front of my subordinates. But shouldn't we hurry to Grim Battle Fortress? The beautiful silver-haired elf waved her tender arms agitatedly, using her body language to express her unease and dissatisfaction. Or, do you know some important information that you don't think I have the right to know? Sasha's subtext was, Duque, do you think I'm not as good as my sisters? Duque sighed. To be honest, Sasha was indeed not as good as her 2 sisters now. Aurelia and Servanas, who had become Ranger Generals a long time ago, had rich battle experience. They were great talents who could take charge on their own. Because the Silver Moon Council did not want the Windrunner family to have too many Ranger Generals, Sasha had always been a small Ranger captain. Now Sasha had the best talent, but she lacked experience. Right now, Sasha's abilities were far from what she had been when she had become the boss of the Silver Alliance. Sasha, who was taking charge of a mission for the first time, was a little impatient and had the patience to observe problems. Duque could not bear to disappoint her. It's not about whether I have the right or not. It's just that I don't know how to break out of this situation. Break out? Duque seemed to sense something. He waved at Sasha and asked her to move her ear closer. Sasha hesitated for a moment, but she immediately did as he said. Even though she believed that even if Duque spoke softly, her sharp hearing would be able to catch Duque's words, Sasha had seen Duque whisper to her elder sister before. She was very curious and felt that it was a form of intimacy and acknowledgement. Yes, acknowledgement from a very great human commander. However, after moving closer and sticking her ear closer, Sasha regretted it a little. Duque's soft breath tickled her pointy ear. It was a strange and numb feeling that she had never felt before. The breath of an adult man caused her slender and beautiful neck to be dyed a crimson red. She tried hard to hold it in, and secretly activated her wind power to interfere with any possible eavesdroppers. Then Duque's words were indeed very important. Yes. The Red Dragon Queen's capture is part of a continuous plot related to the internal strife of the dragons. If I'm not wrong, the Red Dragon Queen was controlled by the artifact that was attached to her power and soul, the demon soul, that was transformed from the dragon's soul. This matter was most likely the doing of the legendary Black Dragon King Deathwing. I'll think of a way to attract Nesario's attention and make our team part of his plot. Sasha had always been curious and intelligent. She had read about the ancient war in ancient books. However, Duque actually wanted to dance on the claws of the scheming Black Dragon King, and then use the sinister and cunning Deathwing? That's too daring, isn't it? According to Sasha's calculations, unless Deathwing rushed to the Well of the Sun and courted death, even with all the power of Kuel Salis, they might not be able to kill this ancient Dragon King. Sasha's sexy red lips opened wide in surprise. She suddenly understood why Duque moved as if he was on a field trip. However, isn't this too obvious? Or is it not obvious enough to attract Deathwing's attention? What if Deathwing isn't monitoring this area? Sasha's mind was in a mess. How can I achieve the effect you want without leaving any traces? Just as Duque was about to say something, a loud noise came from the team. Under Duke and Sasha's astonished gazes, one or more beastmen's broken limbs flew into the air, and the cause of this effect was an incomparably huge ball of arcane energy. Sasha couldn't help but shout, "Ronan, you idiot!" Chapter 473. At first glance, it looked like a wizard casting an arcane explosion spell, the huge purplish-blue ball of light expanding at high speed. However, it was clear that it was actually a huge turbulent flow of arcane energy in the form of an arcane missile. After destroying the target it was supposed to attack, this huge ball of arcane energy suddenly flashed and crashed into another hill in the distance. Break, 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 break. The violent arcane energy turned into countless blue arrows of light, turning the entire hill into a sieve. Gravel flew everywhere, and the dust settled in the damp breeze unique to the wetlands. It was no wonder that Sasha was so agitated. The intense undulations of arcane energy told the red dragon in the sky that something big had happened. The dragons knew how much damage a Morning Star wizard could cause, and would not ignore it. In this era where illiterates were everywhere, some might know that human magic came from the High Elves, but very few knew that the dragons were the ancestors of magic. In ancient times, when the creation titans had arranged for the 5 dragons to become the dragon protectors of the world of Azeroth, they had arranged for the oldest blue dragon king, Malygos, to be the protector of magic. The other dragons had their own characteristics, but they were all very sensitive to magic. As Sasha cursed, she took out the longbow on her back with dazzling movements and nocked an arrow. The orc that had just been killed was obviously not worthy of Sasha's vigilance. The enemy came from the sky. Ronan, who had just finished pouring out his magic, had yet to recover from the violent but overly effective magic attack when he suddenly felt a shiver pass through his body. The feeling scared him so much that he almost jumped up from the ground. Something was approaching. He raised his head to look at the sky, only to see thick, gray cotton clouds. "Idiot, hurry up and leave." Gavin Rad grabbed the collar of this troublemaker and dragged him onto his horse. Ronan's face was pale. He realized that he had messed up again. Just because of a few orc laborers lying in ambush in a mud hole beside the swamp, he had alarmed the god of death in the sky. Trying to keep his head up on the back of the jolting horse, he saw an invisible ripple in the eastern sky, spreading out in all directions with something at its center. It was a little like a drop of water falling on the surface of water, creating a circle of ripples only more violent. The clouds were violently torn apart. What followed was a thunderous ripple that caused Luo Ning to open his eyes wide in shock. Immediately after, a terrifying roar came from the sky. Luo Ning's body involuntarily tensed up as a black shadow broke through the clouds and rapidly expanded in his vision. In just a few seconds, the ground nearby was shrouded by a huge shadow. A deafening roar erupted in the sky, tearing through the atmosphere like a hurricane. Ronan struggled to sit on the horse's back and turned his head to look at the sky. Unfortunately, this time he saw a scene from hell. A giant dragon covered in flames filled the sky, grabbing Ronan's warhorse that was still struggling and neighing in its front claws. Ronan's meticulously prepared bags of supplies kept falling off the warhorse's back. This dark red giant swallowed the rest of the food on its claws and locked its gaze on the small and pitiful human below. On its shoulder sat a ferocious-looking green monster with long fangs and a battle axe in its hand. It pointed at Ronan and let out an ear-piercing roar, as if giving an order to the giant dragon. The dragon roared and extended its claws, diving towards him. "Damn it, you jinx!" Gavin Rat cursed. He did not hide his hatred for Ronan at all. Even though Ronan was not facing the Holy Knight, he could still feel the Holy Knight's anger. It was no wonder that Gavin Rad was angry. Ronan was a troublemaker. If he did not provoke him, he would be a young dragon that was over 1,000 years old. According to the reports, this was the strongest red dragon in the entire wetlands. All the older dragons with independent names had gone to attack the Hillsbrad foothills. It couldn't get any darker. Awala, Malasada. At this moment, Marion Firewing, who was not far from them, released an even more violent chain of spells. A huge ball of chaotic ice energy the size of a carriage condensed in front of Marion's left palm. Unlike Ronan's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. The sound of wind whistling could be heard. Unlike Ronan's berserk magic, Marion displayed her powerful control as an advanced magus. Not only did the ice arrows form a net that enveloped the Crimson Dragon, but they also had a clear arc as they shot out. Marion was actually able to adjust the angle of the attack after the spell was released to maximize the hit rate. The giant dragon that was already in a diving state was indeed worthy of its title as a 1,000-year-old dragon. It seemed like it could not change its direction at all, but with just a flap of its wings, it suddenly climbed more than 30 meters. If Marion's ice arrows, which had a greater range than Blizzard, could self-adjust, the giant dragon might have dodged them. Even so, the giant dragon still managed to dodge most of the ice arrows. As for the remaining small portion, the giant dragon directly used its dragon breath to cancel them out. Except for two, it was obvious that these two ice arrows were Marion's greatest trump card. They looked exactly the same on the surface, but contained at least 10 times the ice element of an ordinary ice arrow. Not only was it powerful, it could also accelerate. A moment ago, it was as fast as a bird, but in the next instant, it had turned into 2 shooting stars that shot at the orc on the dragon's back. How could a mere Dragon Maw orc withstand the attack of a veteran Radiant Moon mage? In a breath's time, the orc had already turned into an ice sculpture. Just the tremors of the giant dragon's ascent had already caused the ice sculpture to crack and crumble, turning into ice crystal dust that dissipated in a few breaths' time. Unfortunately, this was already the limit of what Marion could do. If it was a head-on battle on land, the victor would only be known after the fight. However, an elven mage who could not fly against a giant dragon that could freely soar and perform all sorts of tactical maneuvers would only put Marion at a disadvantage. Even though Duque had rushed over and fired a barrage of arcane missiles at the giant dragon, it was still unable to stop the giant dragon from soaring into the sky. The giant dragon circled around 300 meters in the air, its terrifying yellow pupils carefully sizing up the three mages below. Apologies, Alliance mages, I have to report your existence to Necros. The pupils of everyone in the team of 5 shrank. Chapter 474. Unlike the others, Duque completely ignored Ronin. The dragon's figure was reflected in his eyes. But whether it was Ronin or the dragon, Duke didn't really care about either of them. What Duque cared about was Deathwing. If he couldn't attract Deathwing's attention and get the Black Dragon King's interest, then it would be useless no matter what he did. There wasn't a single warlock in the entire alliance. Apart from warlocks, no one could use the artifact Demon's Soul. Even if Duque was a warlock, he wouldn't use such a method to take control of Alexstrasza. Of course, how to deal with the current situation was also a problem. A young dragon with a body length of 23 or 24 meters and a wingspan of almost 20 meters. If they left it alone, just the fact that it wouldn't come down and was circling in the sky like a demon to summon the dragon was enough for the team of 5 to suffer. After Sasha arrived, she tried to use the ability she obtained from the storm altar to aim at the dragon's eyeball. She failed. 300 meters above the ground, the flow of the wind had become extremely chaotic. She had indeed awakened the power of wind, but that was more of a control over the wind. It wasn't like her elder sister who strengthened herself with the storm. One shouldn't think that a dragon's eyeball was easy to damage just because it was a weakness. As long as a dragon was more than 1,000 years old, its transparent eye membrane would be as hard as steel. Sasha bit her lower lip and said in a clear voice, "If anyone has a way, it's best if you use it now." Everyone first looked at Marion. She was the best fighter among the 5. But the radiant moon mage spread her hands. "It's too far." Everyone noticed that Marion said it was too far, not that they couldn't fight. Then everyone ignored Ronin, who was at a loss of what to do, and ignored the short-handed Holy Knight. They focused their attention on the core of the team, Duke. Duque looked at the red dragon circling in the sky and asked Sasha, "Can you help me guide my magic?" "Oh. I need you to blow the elemental particles from my body onto that big lizard." Sasha was no fool. She was smart enough to immediately understand what Duque meant. Putting aside the power of the spell, just the fact that the direction of the wind could change at any moment made it difficult for the spell to hit a target more than 100 meters away. In fact, in a large-scale war, there was no way to coordinate the power of so many Pharaoh mages without a large-scale mana amplification magic array. What Sasha had done was actually some sort of amplification. Even if they did not know how to use magic, the High Elves were still very sensitive to the flow of elemental power. Not bothering to avoid suspicion, Sasha pressed herself against Duque's back and pointed at the giant dragon 300 meters in the air. A gentle breeze blew from their backs, and their silver hair fluttered in the wind, gently caressing Duque's face. The eyes of the 3 people beside them were transfixed, because in that instant, they vaguely felt that the hair colors of the 2 were unexpectedly the same. In the scene before their eyes, the 2 figures seemed to have blended beautifully. Even with a beauty hugging him from behind, Duque did not have the time to be distracted. He carefully sensed the trajectory of the fire elemental particles that he had released. In his retina, he could see the system elf rapidly calculating the trajectory of the shot with a 3D model. Wind direction, wind speed, fire elemental particles. All the data flashed in Duque's mind. This time, Duque raised his right hand, which was under Sasha's jade arm. Their arms overlapped. Duque then raised his left hand and placed it on Sasha's right arm. He softly chanted an incantation, and a fireball the size of a basin condensed in front of their fingertips. The fireball was very small, so small that it was about the size of a magic apprentice who had just learned fireball. With a soft bang, the fireball flew out. Amateurs enjoyed the show, while experts appreciated the artistry. Gavin Rad was just an onlooker, but Marion and Ronin's eyes were glued to the small fireball. The fireball shot up into the sky with an eye-catching tail of flames. If it were a magic apprentice's fireball, it would probably dissipate after flying 30 meters. Duque's fireball was different. Although it looked like a bonfire in a brazier, the 2 realized that Duque's fireball did not dissipate at all after climbing 50 meters. There were still as many fire elemental particles after flying 50 meters. 100 meters passed. 200 meters. 250 meters. Only then did the fireball visibly shrink. It was not a visual reduction, but the elemental energy it contained had shrunk. At first, the dragon soaring in the sky had only roared to inform its compatriots to come help. It did not care about the fireball at all. From the dragon's point of view, human magic beyond a certain distance was just like the fireworks they played with, purely for show. It was wrong. The fireball still did not dissipate. Instead, it was getting closer and faster. It actually accelerated twice. Roar! The red dragon was furious. Using a fireball in front of a red dragon that specialized in fire was a provocation in itself. Not to mention that the small fireball looked like it could really hit it. Whoosh! Without hesitation, the red dragon spat out dragon breath in an attempt to melt the fireball. Something strange happened again. The small fireball actually made a turn in the air, drawing a dazzling arc, bypassing a large area of the dragon's breath. Then it accelerated a third time and finally the fireball smashed into the giant dragon's lizard face. Red dragons were naturally resistant to fire. The fireball did not do much damage. But it was a slap in the face. In the truest sense, it was a slap in the face from all angles and connotations. Most red dragons did not have good tempers. Not bothering to wait for reinforcements, the 1,000-year-old red dragon flapped its wings and swooped down from the sky. It wanted to teach these insignificant humans who dared to challenge its dignity an unforgettable lesson. As the dragon swooped down, everyone looked at Marion. This powerful counselor of the Silver Moon Council immediately displayed the power of a radiant moon great mage. Complicated arcane energy patterns that were difficult for outsiders to understand spread under her feet. The arcane energy condensed into lines that formed a magic array that was 10 meters in diameter and looked like a work of art in itself. Every inch of the magic array was flowing with mana at a high speed, constantly revolving at a high speed. Then, when the dragon swooped less than 50 meters from the ground, countless magic tentacles that looked like hooks suddenly appeared and netted the dragon. Chapter 475. It would be a joke to use magic to suppress a dragon that was known for its strength. Binding only needed to be controlled at the critical moment. The huge purple-blue energy arrow that Marion had condensed as much arcane energy as possible shot out from her arm that was held horizontally in front of her chest. A huge arrow over 5 meters long pierced through the air and shot towards the dragon. The dragon demonstrated to the team of 5 the terrifying power and superb control of the dragon. It had actually used some sort of berserk sorcery to expand its body by 30%, which was followed by an even more terrifying power. The tentacles that were made of magic made a crisp sound. In the blink of an eye, the dragon flapped its wings again and leaped 5 meters into the air. This was the 5 meters of life and death. At this pace, Marion's ultimate spell would not hit. At this moment, Sasha made her move. Beauty like a pine tree. Bow like a full moon. 2 sharp arrows, enhanced by the power of the wind, shot straight at the crimson behemoth's head. 50 meters was not a short distance. It should have been faster than Marion's magic and hit the dragon's eyes first. However, the dragon's head suddenly moved at the moment of impact. A moment later, the arrow did not hit the target that Wenrisa had expected. Even though it did not hit the dragon's eyes, the 2 arrows that contained Sasha's full power still injured the dragon's eyelids. Roar! It was an unbearable cry of pain. This could only blind it, not kill it. At this moment, no one noticed that Duque had used the swamp beside him to stack arcane impact. Most mages could stack 4 to 5 layers of arcane impact at most, but Duque had stacked it up to 12 layers. And he was using both hands, stacking 12 layers of arcane impact. The future Archmage Ronan was dumbfounded, and Marion, who was at the peak of the mystical domain and second only to the 2 kings of magic, was even more shocked. This control. Was Duque still human? The first arcane impact was released, but it didn't hit the dragon directly. Instead, it hit the left wing. Duque did not expect it to severely injure the giant beast. To the scales and thick skin of a 1,000-year dragon, a Morning Star wizard's magic was no different from a human's ordinary sword. It was a laughable method of attack. However, the impact from arcane impact instantly broke the balance of the giant dragon while Sasha was blinded. The entire dragon was flipped over 45 degrees. The second wave of arcana techniques was unleashed. This was the real deal. A huge ball of arcane energy exploded on the dragon's head. It was as if an invisible and untouchable 100-meter-tall giant had clenched his fists and punched down from above. There was a rumbling explosion in the air. In the next second, the entire dragon was blasted down by this powerful impact. No more, no less. It was exactly 5 meters. The scene was very, very funny. It looked like a frog trying to jump out of a pot of boiling water, but halfway through, it was covered by a lid and had no choice but to fall back into the pot. This kind of coordination was something mortals could not imagine. It was as if the god of fate had said that the next step was for you to die. No matter how careful you were, how you dodged, or how you defended, you still fell for it. It was a mystical force that almost reached the level of fate. But Duque did it. Without Sasha and Duque's coordination, Marion's all-out attack would have sent the dragon flying laughably. With little mana left, Marion could only wait for death. But with the two of them, the dragon was like prey that had fallen into a trap, unable to struggle. Asterisk, this was the sound of a sharp blade cutting through flesh. The magic arrow passed through the snake-like neck. The top half went in, the bottom half came out, and the chest pierced through the heart, finally emerging from the dragon's back. Asterisk, bang. Asterisk, this was the sound of a second explosion after the violent elemental force entered the dragon's body. A radiant moon great wizard. This was a power that was second only to the two strongest kings of magi. It finally exploded in the dragon's body, wantonly destroying its internal organs. The dragon's powerful life force was still supporting it. But the intense pain from its neck and lower body, as well as 1,000 years of battle experience, told this young dragon that it was destined to die. This was beyond the limits of what its body could endure. The huge and powerful heart was still beating vigorously. But the dragon's blood that should have been pumped out into the arteries began to spread from the heart due to the destruction of the ventricles. The dragon's blood, which mortals viewed as a treasure, shot out from the dragon's body that had already fallen 30 meters into the air. At this moment, no one in the team of 5 had the time to feel the joy of killing the dragon. They were shocked to see that the dragon's chest had already swelled up, and there was a clear, piercing red light between its ribs like the sun. The dragon was going to go all out. It wasn't just the dragon's breath. The dragon's entire body started to scoop towards the team of 5. This was a dragon's breath at 0 distance. The faces of the 5 in the team were all pale. Dragons had reverse scales. Touching it would enrage them. Now it wasn't just a reverse scale. You wanted the dragon's life, it would be strange if you didn't drag it down with you. Time seemed to freeze. A distance of 30 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye for a dragon. No matter what decision he made, it was an instantaneous reaction. Gavin Rad, who had been watching the show, activated the paladin's invincibility. The power of holy light burst forth, and he turned himself into a giant golden egg. At least at the last moment, he stood in front of Duque. He got into a horse stance, raised his hammer, and assumed a defensive stance. Ronan and Marion were both mages. They flashed as far away as they could, followed by a beautiful ice barrier. Yes, these two opened the fridge. Only now did Sasha realize that her teammates were all shameless hooligans. 1 invincibility, 3 fridges. All of them could save themselves at critical moments. But she was a ranger. No matter how fast she ran, she could only run. How could she be faster than a dragon that was flying in the sky and diving at high speed? Sasha's pretty face lost all color. Her delicate face was almost the same color as her silver hair. She forgot to breathe and forget to run. She had simulated over 100 scenarios in her mind, but none of them could let her escape. The dragon was too fast and the range of its breath was too wide. If a dragon of this level breathed down, the area within a 50-meter radius would definitely turn into a fiery hell. Not even a blade of grass would grow. Sasha was in despair. Chapter 476. Sasha couldn't help but cry out in her heart. Am I going to die? Is this the fear of death? No. I don't want to die. There are still many places I haven't been to. There are still many sceneries I haven't seen. How can I die here like this? No, I don't want to die. Oh, who can save me? Big sister. Second sister. Fourth sister. Duque. Like a drowning person who was about to drown, Sasha's thoughts ran wild. This wasn't because Sasha was weak. It was because a ranger was a hunter and had too many limitations. Forget about the hunter's signature skill, feigned death. The so-called feigned death was just pretending to be a corpse to fool the enemy into thinking that you were really dead so they wouldn't attack you. The problem was that this giant dragon's destructive breath was indiscriminate. Without a way to defend against the fire element and space to dodge, she could only rely on her own resistance to take it. Could Sasha's petite body take it? For a ranger who focused on agility and dodging when there was no way to dodge, it was time to die. It was no wonder that Sasha was in despair. In the last second, Duque did a series of actions that would dazzle anyone's eyes. A special arcane explosion blasted a rectangular hole in the ground that was big enough for Sasha to hide in. Mud flew everywhere, and at the same time, a stench unique to the mud of the swamp spread. Duque pressed down on Sasha's shoulders with lightning speed. With unimaginable strength and speed, he pushed the dazed Sasha into the hole. He even stuffed something into Sasha's hands. Almost at the same time, a giant ice pillar appeared out of nowhere, stabbing into the ground between the two of them and the giant dragon. After Sasha was pressed into the hole by Duque, she leaned against the ice bed that had appeared out of nowhere. Her sky blue and almond-shaped eyes were wide open as she looked at Duque in disbelief. That moment seemed to last for eternity. Sasha swore that as long as she lived, she would never forget this moment. Everything at the edge of her vision had been dyed golden red. The sky, the atmosphere, the rising dust, and the flying bits of grass, all were dyed with the same ruinous hue. She could clearly feel the unparalleled heat coming from the ground and the ice bed. She could almost see that in the next moment, he would turn into ashes right in front of her eyes. This handsome man who was almost as beautiful as her, the real lover of her elder sister, would die in front of her just like that, just to protect her? A very clear feeling of heartbreak filled all her emotional space. Seeing Duque's face that had suddenly become extremely handsome and pleasing to the eye, Sasha was completely stunned. Duque gave her a reassuring look, then opened his right palm, stretched out his 5 fingers, and activated the ice barrier in front of her. A trapezoid of ice that appeared out of thin air enveloped Duque, separating him from Sasha. Fridge. A mage's absolute defense. Unless one's elemental energy was too much weaker than the enemy's, a mage would be invincible during this period of time. The weight of the ice pushed Sasha deeper into the ground, flattening and compacting every inch of space around Sasha. As Sasha had already been pressed into this rectangular pit, she wasn't directly pressed by the ice. Instead, because of this, Sasha became even safer. An incomparably high temperature descended. First, it was her head, then her entire body. The temperature from the soil became even higher. If it was said that she felt like she was being roasted on a fire earlier, then now she felt like she was being thrown into the mouth of an erupting volcano. It was a terrifying feeling that her skin was about to be roasted just by touching it. She felt like she was stuck to the edge of the pit. Am I going to die? Sasha couldn't help but scream in her heart. But through the transparent ice, she saw Duque's expression frozen in the layer of ice. It was a gentle, reassuring smile. If you knew that I'm still going to be roasted to death after all that you've done, would you still smile so gently? Sasha continued to scream in her heart. At this moment, Sasha suddenly realized that her right palm was glowing. She turned her head in shock, only to realize that it was a very rare epic-level trigger shield accessory. A gentle barrier of light with a chilly aura covered Sasha like an eggshell, perfectly blocking the high heat that was pressing in from all directions. Sasha finally calmed down. She murmured softly, "Did you predict this as well?" There was no longer any threat or fear. Sasha, who had finally relaxed, reached out her left hand and caressed it. She pressed it against Duque's right hand through the ice. Her face was also pressed against the ice, enjoying the special coldness. After the mage's ice barrier was activated, the mage was fixed inside like an ice sculpture. The mage inside seemed to have stopped everything, but in fact, his thoughts hadn't. His sight and senses were still working. If needed, the mage could also cancel the ice barrier in advance and regain his freedom. But Duque didn't do that. The ground suddenly shook violently. The earth was shaking and the sand and stones were trembling. Because the 1,000-year-old red dragon that had already made its final attack was like a plane crashing. It was shoveling the soft ground with incredible speed. Rumble! A loud sound exploded under Duque and Sasha's feet, spreading further and further. The dragon's huge body shoveled away a lot of soil and stones, and splashed up a lot of mud in the swamp. The sound of the dragon shoveling the ground continued for a few seconds, and then there was a short pause. Then there was an intense rolling sound. After shoveling for a while, the dragon hit something like a boulder, and the shoveling turned into a rolling sound. How much time had passed? Sasha didn't know. She only knew that when everything calmed down, the cool piece of ice that was gently pressing down on her body disappeared. She didn't know why, but they clasped their fingers together across the ice. Between Sasha's 2 long legs, 2 warm human legs squeezed in. Luckily, at the last moment, Duque's left hand pressed on the ice above Sasha's right shoulder, preventing his whole body from falling on top of her. Close. So close. They were so close that they could see every detail in each other's eyes, and feel each other's breath. Their faces instantly turned red. Time seemed to freeze again. Suddenly, Gavin Rad's untimely shout came from afar. "Boss, are you okay?" Chapter 477. Gavin Rad was a qualified guard. Most of the time he was a tactful fellow. He had seen too many affairs between nobles. In fact, he had done quite a few of them. It was just that after Stormwind City had fallen, he had put more effort into battle and military affairs. Just now, when the dragon had tried to plow the ground, even though Gavin Rad was invincible, he had been sent flying by the huge impact. He was not hurt, but he had been thrown into a shallow swamp. He was in heavy armor and was in trouble. He could not run over, so he could only shout nervously. Who knew that Duque would have such romantic thoughts with his rumored sister-in-law in a situation like this? This rough man's words had messed up the atmosphere between Duque and Sasha. That was not enough. And then there was the next sentence. "Boss, are you dead yet? If you're not, make a sound." Duque did not make a sound. Instead, he used an arcane spell to write the word humph in the air. Gavin Rad, the single dog, was dumbfounded. Luo Ning was fine, but he was a little unlucky when he activated Ice Barrier. His whole body was sent flying by the dragon, and he landed in a swamp far away. After the Ice Barrier was deactivated, he fell into the mud like a tree. The swamp was not as deep as his calf. He would not drown, but he was in a sorry state. Ronan's face and red hair were covered in mud. To put it nicely, it looked like he had played with mud and wrestled. To put it bluntly, it felt like he had crawled out of a pit of shit. The only one who was not in a sorry state was Marion. Her blink was very far and she had crossed dozens of meters. So, after she deactivated Ice Barrier, the first thing she did was to finish off the dragon. A 40-meter-long super arcane energy blade extended from Marion's slender hand, and it beheaded the dragon who was coughing up blood and struggling on the ground to finish off Duque and the others. Everything was silent. "Duque, can you get up first? You're so heavy." Not daring to look at Duque, Sasha, who was under him, tilted her face slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry." Her current posture was indeed unsightly. Even the thick-skinned Duque blushed. How should it be said, the three Windstalker sisters were too similar. For a moment, Duque almost thought that the person in front of him was his own Aurelia, and he wanted to press on and get intimate with her. Fortunately, the hair color of the three sisters was quite different. Especially Windsor's bright silver. That was close. That was close. He almost became a beast. Duque thought to himself that he was lucky. Then he stood up in a gentlemanly manner, bent down, and extended his hand. Sasha was slightly stunned, but she still placed her soft and slender hand on Duque's palm. On the other side, Gavin Rad had just pulled the miserable Ronan out of the swamp. The swamp might not be deep, but the suction wasn't something an ordinary person could easily break free from. Then, the two burly men covered in mud saw Duque pull Sasha out of the pit gracefully. Duque even carefully patted off the snow on Sasha's shoulder armor. "Hey, can someone tell me why when I pull you up, what we're patting off is mud that smells like that thing? Why are they patting off snow?" Gavin Rad muttered unhappily. That's right. The style was completely different. One side was very beautiful, and it was completely in line with all the elements that were praised by bards in night novels. The other side was very good, but the style was terrible. Ronan was completely unmoved. Instead, he held his head with both hands in distress. "I only saw that I once again helplessly watched my teammate in danger of death. The one who risked his life to save his teammate was the great Duke Marcus, not me." Gavin Rad was originally very angry at the troublemaker, Ronan. But after knowing that Ronan had caused the death of his teammate and the pain and self-blame that he couldn't hide, Gavin Rad suddenly felt pity for the rough red-haired mage. Marion was very unhappy. She was clearly the main damage dealer. Why did the main character become Duque? No, that wasn't important. What was important was why Duque actually had something going on with his sister-in-law. That was what Marion was most unhappy about. Marion put her hands on her hips. "Hey, whatever you want to say, wait a bit. I insist that we move immediately. Based on the speed of those lizards, more will arrive in 10 minutes at most." How far could they go in 10 minutes? The horses of the five were all startled. Ronan's horse was swallowed in one bite, and the other horses were nowhere to be seen. The only one that could be seen was Gavin Rad's horse. Perhaps the horses of paladins were especially easily inspired by the holy light and were especially courageous. Anyway, Gavin Rad's heavy war horses didn't run. They just stayed at the edge of the swamp and watched Gavin Rad. However, when Gavin Rad came out of the swamp and passionately hugged the horse's head, the horse seemed to have smelled Gavin Rad's unpleasant odor. It actually snorted, turned around, and galloped 10 meters away before turning back to look at Gavin Rad. It was clearly saying, "Don't touch me if you don't wash yourself clean. Oh my God. I'm so handsome, but my horse is actually looking down on me today." Gavin Rad looked like he had nothing left to live for. Duke glanced at the cloudy sky in the distance, then looked at the system notification and said, "It's going to rain. We won't be able to walk far in 10 minutes. If we move recklessly, we'll be digging our own graves. Let's just stay here." "Stay here?" Marion's eyes widened in disbelief. "Of course we'll disguise ourselves." At this moment, Marion, Gavin Rad, Sasha, and Ronan were all stunned. What kind of disguise could they do in 10 minutes? The 100-meter-long ground was still burning. The huge traces of the Crimson Dragon's crash could be seen from far away. Not to mention the eye-catching corpse of the Crimson Dragon that was as large as a small mountain. Marion was a little flustered. She subconsciously raised her head and tilted her chin. "I'd like to know how a mere morning star like you can do something that even a radiant moon wizard like me can't do." Radiant moons and morning stars were essentially star wizards, and were in the category of perpetual motion machines. However, they could not hide the fact that the moon was closer to the ground than the stars. Simply put, a radiant moon's mana output was at least 100 times higher than a morning star wizard's. Sasha was about to say something, but Duque waved his hand to stop her. Duque didn't seem angry at all. "In terms of strength, I obviously can't compare to you. However, in terms of some minor magic techniques, you can't compare to me." With that, Duque snapped his fingers, and everyone immediately discovered that the surrounding scenery had changed. Chapter 478. A huge canopy started to cover everyone's heads. It extended in a small curve from the top of their heads in all directions. The border was like a piece of paper that had been set on fire. A burning mark that kept moving downwards appeared in everyone's field of vision. When it felt very realistic but still a little distorted, everyone came to a realization. No, it should be said that Gavin Rad was the only one watching the show. Everyone, including Sasha, suddenly realized that the scene they saw from the canopy had become a little illusory and hazy. Illusion? But this big? An area of effect spell that spanned hundreds of meters left everyone speechless. The two mages and the ranger all used their own abilities to charge out of the area covered by the illusion. Gavin Rad saw this and immediately jumped onto his horse, running out to watch the show. When they charged out and looked back, everyone's mouths, which had already been slightly open from shock, immediately widened. What did they just see? The huge deep mark that the giant dragon had made when it fell was gone. What they saw was just an ordinary muddy road in the swamp. The dragon corpses that had been piled up like a small hill had now become a small hill. As if the heavens were helping Duque, rain started to fall from the sky. It seemed that the thick burnt smell and the unique fishy smell of dragon blood would be diluted in a while. Seeing this, Gavin Rad breathed a sigh of relief. But unexpectedly, the two pharaohs' expressions became even more nervous. "Not good," Ronan cried out in shock. Only the spellcasters themselves knew the limitations of illusions. The bigger and more complicated the scene created by the illusion, the more it tested the spellcaster's skill. If it was said that when the rain poured down, there wouldn't be any water left in the area of the illusion. As long as the observer wasn't an idiot, they would definitely be seen through. Ronan cried out in shock. Marion also clenched her fists nervously. Once again they couldn't believe their eyes. What was that? The rain poured down from the sky and the dense and long lines of rain fell to the ground. It didn't have the unstable feeling of being in a trance like a low-level illusion. It did not have the rigid intermediate illusions, which did not care if it was raining or scattering sand. Everything inside the illusions would be absorbed without making a sound. They only saw that after the rain line fell into the field of illusion, it looked like the rain line was still falling naturally from the outside. When it fell to the ground, it created small splashes, and when it fell into the puddles of the swamp, it created small ripples. Furthermore, they weren't rigid and identical water ripples. They were ripples of different sizes that would affect each other. The four of them were dumbfounded. Still in disbelief, Gavin Rad stood at the boundary of the illusion with his hands on his hips, looking left and right. Impressively, it was verified that Duque had used illusions to simulate almost everything. Most of the things inside and outside were the same, except for the traces of fire and shoveling, as well as the huge dragon corpse. Right at this moment, An urgent dragon roar came from the horizon. It wasn't a threat, nor was it a demonstration. It was more like a message. Coming quickly. Duque waved his hand and the four of them ran back into the field of illusion. Just in case, they found a small hill under the shade of a tree and hid as much as possible. Looking up, they saw several black dots rapidly enlarging on the horizon. In a few breaths, they could vaguely see these big red guys that had pushed away the dark clouds. Naturally, they were the dragon riders of the Dragonmaw tribe. They rode on their giant dragons and circled above Duque's head for several kilometers. They seemed to be shouting something, but they were too far away to hear clearly. Sasha's long elven ears twitched. Relying on the strength given to her by the wind, she whispered everything she heard. Sasha was actually a language genius. She didn't understand the dragon language, nor did she understand the orc language, but she could perfectly repeat the dragon's whispers and the orc's shouts. Duque knew the orc language, and after translating it, it was, "Didn't that guy Orlando's dragon shout that there's a strong enemy here? Why can't I see anyone or the dragon?" "Don't tell me he ran away?" another orc rider replied. "Probably. There are no signs of battle around. Once the big guys we're riding start fighting, they can be seen from miles away." That was how the orcs discussed. Marion's translation of the dragon language was a different version. "Be careful, Graal's signal is that he can't handle it. Graz is already the strongest of the third generation of dragons. He might have already been killed. Is there really such a terrifying enemy? Don't underestimate the humans and high elves. Even though most of them are weak, the strongest among them has the ability to threaten Her Majesty's life." The giant dragon circled a few times in the sky, but it didn't find anything. Most of the red dragons flew away first. Under the orc's orders, it reluctantly lowered its altitude and flew over the nearby swamp at a height of about 100 meters. Most dragons didn't care about things that weren't their interests. Obviously, this female red dragon wasn't one of them. On the ground, a hill attracted her attention. Even though she was being controlled, she still tried to use all sorts of things to distract her attention and anger, such as admiring the beautiful mountains and rivers. Unknowingly, she clearly remembered the terrain of the entire wetland. She was absolutely sure that there wasn't a hill here 2 days ago. She began to get closer. A dragon's nose was more sensitive than most dogs. She didn't feel it when she was soaring high in the sky, but when she arrived, she smelled the faint scent of blood and burnt soil. However, as far as he could see, there was no sign of battle at all. An instinctive sense of danger made her secretly adjust her flight path and deviate from the predetermined course. If the other party really killed Graal, who was known as the strongest of the third-generation dragons, in such a short time, then she would only be sending herself to her death if she bumped into him. This female dragon's cautiousness saved her life. That's right, she was originally flying straight towards the corpse of the already dead Graal. She stealthily deviated and ended up brushing past the edge of Duque's illusory domain. Most red dragons preferred melee combat, but there were also geniuses like Krasis. This little female dragon noticed something was wrong the moment she brushed past the illusory domain. She turned her yellow eyes slightly and saw through the illusory domain. She was shocked to see Graal's corpse and a human mage smiling at her under the shade of a tree. No, there wasn't just one mage. She saw at least 3 mages, a paladin and a ranger. Chapter 479. In that instant, the little female dragon had 2 choices. One was to become the beastman's loyal dog and point out the location of Duque and the others. She could imagine that she would definitely be attacked by Duque and the others. The most likely outcome was that she would die. This was also a matter of status. If Duque and the others panicked, or if Duque opened a portal early to escape, the little female dragon would not be so afraid. However, the best fighter among her peers was already lying on the ground. Blood was still flowing from his severed neck. It was not a scene of blood splattering dozens of feet, but it was still frightening enough. What kind of person was a mage who could easily kill a 1,000-year-old dragon? The little female dragon did not dare to imagine. Looking at Duke's strange face and the confident smile on Duke's face, Luo Ruashi felt a chill run down her spine. The little female dragon naturally took it as a warning, "Don't talk too much. Otherwise you will end up like him." So, the little female dragon did not hesitate to choose the second option. Pretending to be deaf and mute. After all, if the queen was rescued, she might still have to mix with the humans and elves in the future. The Tirisful Council had worked together with the 4 major dragon races for thousands of years. The little female dragon whispered in dragon language, "I didn't see anything." The little female dragon was not sure if he had heard her. Unexpectedly, in the next second, The young human used arcane energy to produce a line of words. It was standard dragon language, and on it was the name of the leader of the Red Dragon Army, Alexstrasza. The little female dragon said, "Understood." Mount, what are you shouting for? The beastman on the dragon's back asked rudely. "Nothing, my throat is itchy," the little female dragon replied helplessly in her unpracticed beastman language. To the people below, flying at high speed was just a matter of a flash. If dragons could sweat, the little female dragon would definitely be drenched as if she had just been fished out of water. The dragon's shadow disappeared into the distance. The group of 5 finally sighed in relief. The danger had passed. How to clean up the mess was now on the agenda. Ronan rubbed the back of his head as if he had been holding back a breath and suddenly exploded. "Everyone's sorry, I messed up again." "Who said you messed up?" Duque said with a straight face. "I thought you had a bright future and could attract enemies, so I taught you how to use your magic talent. I'm the one who should feel sorry for letting you become bait without knowing it." Is this true? Luoning froze. If he hadn't made a move against the first few beastmen, then Gavin Rat alone would have been enough to slaughter them all. Duque pursed his lips and turned to Marion. "Did you hear that dragon's dragon language?" She didn't know why Duque wanted to protect Ronan's pride, but since Duque was the boss of the team, Marion was happy to do him a favor. "Congratulations, Duque. You've successfully connected with the Red Dragon Army." After saying that, Marion translated a little of the little female dragon's dragon language. The other 3 once again opened their mouths wide in shock. Is that even possible? Red dragons that like to fight are few and far between after all. Killing this guy will be getting rid of a scourge. In terms of results, our fight was perfect. No one was hurt and they were on the line. Also, Duque chanted a short incantation and a giant portal opened up. In front of the 4 of them, a semi-ethereal specter mage walked out of the blue oval portal with a giant magic puppet. "Master, what are your orders?" Karthika asked. He was supposed to be an influential figure in this world, but because of a ridiculous twist of fate, he died before he could even make a name for himself. Duque pointed at the giant dragon corpse. "Same old rules." Karthika's mouth twitched. "Master Duque, I must remind you that the Red Dragon Army is fundamentally kind." Duque said righteously, "Right now our factions are at war and we're on our way to save Alexstrasza. If the Red Dragon Queen is that petty, I'll make sure she doesn't have a good time." "Alright, you're the master. Whatever you say." Karthika waved his hand and more arcane puppets ran out of the portal. Under his command, they skillfully dissected the dragon corpse. The 3rd-generation Red Dragon Grizzla, who had a bright future ahead of him and had a high chance of becoming an ancient dragon, was dissected and transported away in front of everyone. The entire process took less than 20 minutes. It was clear that Karthika's skinning was at the master level. "Now I believe that you've killed more than 300 red dragons in Alterac," Marion said, giggling. Although many military reports were accompanied by magical images, the arrogant elves always felt that the humans were lying about the military reports and exaggerating their achievements. Otherwise, why would 50,000 beastmen be able to beat the high elves like dogs, while the 20 to 30,000 humans were able to kill the beastmen? Didn't this mean that the high elves were inferior to the humans? The elves couldn't accept this truth from the bottom of their hearts. Karthika shrugged. "I didn't want to. After dissecting a few hundred red dragons, I can dissect one with my eyes closed." What was Duque doing at this moment? He sighed and laughed inwardly. Of the 2 archmages in Azeroth, Karthika was a tragedy. Unless he joined the Lich King in the future, he would be like this for the rest of his life. Luoning. Who knew if Luoning would be able to rise to the level he had in history, in this life? However, this wasn't something that Duque had to worry about. After the dozens of arcane puppets, which had been created using the Karazhan Curator as a blueprint, cleaned up the scene, Karthika retreated with his subordinates. "Alright, what do we do now?" Gavin Rad looked at the supplies that had been brought back from Karazhan and was worried that there weren't enough horses to transport them. This was because the food stored in a mage's storage bag would sometimes go bad. Duque suddenly laughed. He flipped his hand and pointed behind him with his thumb. "Why don't we ask our friends over there?" No one knew what Duque was doing. In grim battle, Queen Alexstrasza, who had transformed into her human form and had been lying on the cold floor, twitching in pain, suddenly opened her eyes. The main reason why the Red Dragon Army was willing to be enslaved by the Beastmen was because the entire race was connected on a spiritual level. The Queen's will was absolute. Similarly, the lower Red Dragons also acted as the support for the Queen's power. On this day, Alexstrasza once again felt the loss of the Red Dragon army. For the young dragons that only had animal instincts and the intelligence of a 5 or 6-year-old human child, a loss was a loss. Strictly speaking, as long as they didn't have complete self-awareness, they couldn't be considered a part of the Red Dragon army. She could feel herself weakening on a spiritual level. If she completely succumbed or weakened, then she would not be able to maintain the protective magic on her dragon egg to protect her child that might be born. The Azeroth dragon was a little strange. The eggs of the female dragon were not the real offspring. Just like a human female's egg, not every egg would become a child, but an egg would be released every month. The red dragon was similar. Female dragons would ovulate at relatively regular intervals, dragon eggs. However, these dragon eggs could only hatch and become real dragons after the male dragon imbued them with a special spiritual inheritance and power. Of course, female dragons could also use their power to catalyze the eggs to hatch young dragons, but these young dragons were usually just trash. The power of the parents determined the upper limit of the offspring's power. If a dragon wanted to give birth to a strong offspring, it was best to find a dragon of a similar level as a partner. Alexstrasza knew very well that countless ambitious people were eyeing her precious dragon eggs. The Red Dragon Queen couldn't help but mutter in her heart, "Duque, come and save me. If you can save me before my babies are destroyed, then I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life. Otherwise, if it's too late, don't blame me for taking it out on you. It seems like I can't beg a little human to be so perfect. I'm so conflicted. On the one hand, she had to place her hopes on Duque and hope that he would come quickly. On the other hand, she felt that it was too much to place her hopes on a human who wasn't very powerful. Alexstrasza, who was deep in the whirlpool of despair, was actually a little confused at this moment. Duque could not guess the thoughts of the once high and mighty Red Dragon Queen. At this moment, Duque had met an unexpected ally. In the original time and space, when the Alliance mobilized to save the Red Dragon Queen, the main force of the Horde had already been defeated, leaving only the scattered tribes and clans resisting stubbornly. Therefore, in the entire wetland area besides the Orc Dragon Riders of the Dragonmaw clan, there were also a large number of Alliance armed forces: the Griffin Knights of the Wildhammer Dwarves from the Eagle Nest Mountain, the Bronzebeard Dwarves from the Iron Furnace Castle, and the Silver Hand from Lordaeron. At this point in time, this was the standard definition of the enemy's rear. Duque didn't expect anyone to come here to help him, but who knew that he would meet an important person, Prince Muradin Bronzebeard. He was said to be a prince because the father of the 3 Bronzebeard brothers had died, and now Magni Bronzebeard was the king. As Magni's second brother, Muradin was naturally promoted to a prince. After the little female dragon ran away, seeing Muradin and a group of dwarven warriors emerge from the ground, Duque was dumbfounded. "Why are you here?" "Nonsense. You, the deputy commander of the Alliance, can come. Why can't I, the Cosmodan dwarf, be here?" Yes, dwarves were always so simple and direct. In the eyes of humans, this was almost too rough. Duque couldn't help but smile. That's right. Strictly speaking, this was still dwarven territory, just that it was occupied by the Horde. I was wrong. I'm so happy to see you, my friend. Duque bent down happily and opened his arms. Duque immediately knew that he was too happy. "Welcome, Bronzebeard dwarf, my eternal friend." Muradin, who was carrying at least 60 kilograms of armor, almost pounced on Duque and gave him a bear hug. Kalala, Duque could clearly hear the crisp sound of his bones. Just a little more, and Duque felt that he would have broken many bones all over his body. Muradin immediately realized that he had gone too far, and immediately let go of Duque. "Damn it, you human mages just have weak bodies. Woo-woo. I'm asking for it. It's my fault. I'm just a university animal and I transmigrated to this body. You're blaming me? I'm already training. I'm training all right." Chapter 481. Duque lamented in his heart as he complained, "Not every man is called Arnold Schwarzenegger." Alas, Azeroth was still a world with backward medical care and harsh natural environments. Babies who weren't particularly strong couldn't survive to adulthood at all. In a sense, the average physique of modern people was actually far inferior to that of medieval European adults. That was a long story. Ahem. Duque coughed a few times before he could catch his breath. Muradin glanced around. "Come on, let's get back to our base." The dwarves really had burrowed out of the ground. No one would have thought that under the wet, muddy swamp, the dwarves had opened countless tunnels. They weren't simply reinforced with wooden planks, but tunnels with standard beams and pillars as well as stone roofs. Looking at the tunnel, which was rather low by human standards and was wet from time to time, Muradin immediately apologized. "I'm sorry my friends, we didn't mean to mistreat you. After all, this is built to dwarven standards." The most majestic dwarf wouldn't be taller than 1.6 meters. So the dwarves already found the tunnels at a height of 1.8 meters to be very comfortable. This was hard on the big guy Gavin Rad, who had to crouch all the way along. Walking in the tunnels, everyone got over it. Only Marion used her magic, a little disgusted. She covered the entire ceiling, walls and ground with frost elements to make sure that the places she walked were relatively clean. Muradin frowned but didn't say anything. As they walked and talked, Duque finally learned why Muradin was here. At the beginning of the alliance, Muradin had stayed in Lordaeron as the highest representative of the bronze-bearded dwarves in the alliance. He also tried his best to get support for his country. Muradin soon discovered that, in fact, it was enough for him to deal with Duque. Because as long as his request wasn't too outrageous, Duque would get it for the bronze-bearded dwarves even if he had to go to other human kingdoms to extort, and use his own fleet to deliver it directly to the meeting point on the northern coast of Ironstove Castle. Medicine, food, even iron ore. Duque did the best that an ally could do. Over time, Muradin and Duque became very good friends. Recently, the alliance had begun to switch from defense to offense. Muradin could no longer sit still and handed over the work to his deputy. He immediately rushed back to the Iron Furnace Fort. In a situation where Magni was unable to allocate more manpower to him, the second son of the Bronzebeard family relied on his dozen or so good friends to attack the mines controlled by the orcs and rescue many of his compatriots from within. Then, relying on these rescued compatriots, they organized a resistance army in the wetlands and attacked the orcs everywhere. Duque couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. "I was wondering why the sky was filled with flying dragons, but it turns out they're actually searching for you." Duque felt like he had been implicated. Muradin did not show any weakness. "Isn't it to prepare in advance? When you attack Sodder Bridge, we can support you from the south." Duque smiled bitterly. After walking for more than half an hour, they finally arrived at the base of Muradin's rebel army, the Verga excavation site in the southern part of the wetlands. Unlike the excavation site in the future, which was filled with all sorts of things, this was now just the dwarves' excavation site. The innumerable pits and complicated terrain gave the orcs a headache. To the orcs, the dwarves here were even more troublesome than groundhogs that loved to dig holes. The orcs had temporarily abandoned this place. In a sense, this was a liberated area for the dwarves. In the huge cave, the dwarves here noticed the guests Muradin had brought, as well as Sasha and Marion in the group. A dwarf's eyes lit up. "Ah, beautiful elven ladies. And two of you." The dwarf ran over and bowed clumsily. "Falstead the dragon catcher is at your service, elven ladies." Note that this fellow only bowed to Sasha. Only then did Duque realize that before him, the high elves of Kuel Salis were the dwarves' only truly trusted allies. Of course, this did not completely explain why Falstead's attention was focused on Sasha. It wasn't just him, most of the dwarves' gazes were focused on her. Evidently they found her very charming. "Did you forget someone?" At the side, Marion had her hands on her hips, the word, annoyed, written all over her face. Duque hurriedly tried to smooth things over. All right. For the sake of your liberation, let's get down to business." The group of five ignored this little interlude, and went to an even more secluded cave within the large cave. It was very narrow when they entered, and there was a huge sluice gate. According to Muradin, it could even block out dragon breath. When they arrived at Muradin's command center and saw the flags representing the orcs on the sand table, Duque immediately realized that things were more troublesome than he had imagined. He saw many small flags near the Grimbader fortress that was now under the control of the orcs. Muradin introduced them to Duque one by one. Those damned green-skinned creatures knew this day would come. Ever since Orgrim and the Horde suffered a tragic defeat at the gates of Lordaeron, the Horde's forces began to gather here. Look, these are all second-rate clans of the Horde. Each clan has about 10,000 to 30,000 people, and most of them are adult orcs. This is a steel tooth, that's a digging tooth, and that's a broken axe. Duque narrowed his eyes. Without the Red Dragon army, the victorious Alliance army would not take long to reach the Cosmodan region. Yes, the Alliance of Lordaeron might have to go all out to reach here, but Duque had no doubt that the Alliance could do it. Duque could almost imagine the scene of the Alliance army gathering north of Sodder Bridge. However, as long as Orgrim was still the chief of the horde, he could imagine that the alliance wanted to further weaken the orcs before the army attacked. The simplest way was to kill the Red Dragon Queen or rescue her. Also, the clumsy Lordaeron elite bandits had already sounded the alarm for the orcs. This situation was at least 10 times harsher than the rescue mission in history. Now, more than 100,000 orcs had surrounded Grim Battle. Even if the combat power of these second-rate clans was at most half of the orc warriors of the Blackstone and Warsong clans, and not much stronger than ordinary human soldiers, they were still not 100,000 pigs. Duque, you said you want to save the Red Dragon Queen? Are you confident? If you are, I have 1,000 elites here to carry out a feint attack for you. The heroic Muradin was definitely a friend. One look and you could tell that he was the kind of good brother who was willing to go through mountains of knives and seas of fire for his brothers. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.